across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. You knew that bit. And we are the home of common sense. My God, someone has to be. There isn't much out there these days, is there? Anyway, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. Very much appreciate that. If you do miss anything of the show, if you missed anything the last couple of days, you want to look back, do please go to my YouTube page. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show is what it's called. So you've got an easy chance of finding it. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. So much to talk about in this hour. Of course, we'll cover all the week top stories, but also going to be talking about this extraordinary China spying case. I don't know whether you can make head or tail of it, but I mean, I'm certainly struggling. Britain's top prosecutor says the Chinese spying case fell apart after the government failed to provide key evidence, including proof that China was a threat to national security, which it blatantly is. Oh, well, it wasn't at the time. These two men who've obviously pleaded not guilty, pleaded completely innocent, were alleged to have committed these crimes. But the current director of public prosecution said officials ignored months of requests leading to the collapse of the trial. And when the Prime Minister says that, that they didn't deliberately collapse the trial, the DPP, who is in the job that the Prime Minister used to be in, says different. Someone's lying, but who is it? The former DPP? Or the current DPP. Also, we're going to be covering Tory leader Kemi Badenoch. She's giving her keynote speech to Tory party conference this morning, around about 11. I know some of the shows do take some of the speeches, but realistically, we won't be taking the speech. We'll see if we can get some excerpts, but she's going to be making that speech. It's a make-or-break moment for her leadership, with talk of a potential coup, even sooner than those May local elections coming up next year. Yesterday, of course, as we talked about on the show, it was the anniversary of the October 7th Hamas massacre. More than 1,000 people joined anti-Israeli protests across the country. They claim they're pro-Palestinian, but including at universities, Tower Bridge and elsewhere, they were shouting slogans such as "Long live the Intifada," which is a call for more massacres of Jews. Not quite sure what that's got to do with saving babies in Gaza. We'll be talking about that. Plus, of course, we've got some developments in those Gaza peace talks taking place in Egypt. A lot of the big players involved in those talks flying in today. And we've already had a list of exchanges of prisoners and hostages that has been announced by Hamas. Some of the prisoners that they are demanding are exchanged for some of those hostages kept starved and beaten in tunnels will be some of the people, the men, the terrorists who took part in the October 7th massacre. That is quite a thing for any country to do, like Israel, to get back their own people. Plus, we're also going to be talking about the British steel industry facing its biggest crisis yet after the EU, which of course we're really friendly with because Keir Starmer's a massive Ramona, and he said if only we had a Labour government and they could be friendly with the EU, then everything would be fine. No, the EU has announced 50% tariffs on UK steel. It's rather a setback for Keir Starmer in his reset of relations with Brussels. The European Commission said it would halve tax-free import quotas and double tariffs to protect its own producers. Funny thing is, when Donald Trump does it, they think it's wrong, but it's OK for them to do it. Who knew? Anyway, there is so much more to talk about, plenty more coming up. I want to hear your thoughts on all of the big topics that we are talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard message cost. Now, delighted to say joining me today, he couldn't make it on Monday as per usual because of, Tory party conference. Someone's got to go, so we don't have to. Is commentator Sam Armstrong. Very, very good morning to you.
Good morning. People were tweeting me on Monday, questioning where I was.
Were you?
They thought I'd been kidnapped.
Exactly.
No,
well,
I promise I'm
we
back
had
here
a very
today.
good replacement. We had a very good replacement. We've had. It's always great to get you in the show. I mean, can we just start? There's so much to talk about. Let's just race through it because I'd love people to get in touch. I couldn't decide what to ask the question about today. Normally there's an obvious question to ask about. But, I mean, a lot of people are saying, people in the know are saying, this China spy case story, that this is actually a much more significant story that have longer term implications for our country, our security, our economy and everything than pretty much anything else we're discussing. But it's kind of hard to get your head around, isn't it? But the fundamental thing is we had 2 charges against 2 men, both of whom denied the charges. It is important. These are under the Official Secrets Act, basically. But basically, they needed convictions against Christopher Berry and Chris Cash, accused of passing secrets to Beijing, a foreign government. The dispute is whether or not there was at any point enough evidence for them to be charged, or whether the evidence changed depending on what the government was willing to put forward. And the chief prosecutor, the director of public prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, who's in the job which the Prime Minister previously did, he said that the CPS repeatedly tried to get witness statements from the government that would have shown that China was a threat to national security, which it clearly is, but they failed to provide evidence, and so at some point they had to drop the case because they didn't get the evidence they needed for the case. The Prime Minister expressly denied, categorically, he challenged this claim, saying officials could never have provided that evidence because China had not been designated a threat to national security by the previous government, crucially, in 22-23, when these alleged crimes took place. Who do you think's telling the truth?
What? Can you smell a rat is the question, because boy, can I.
I am absolutely smelling a sort of Diego Garcia Chagos Island style rat.
Absolutely right. Now look, this offence required 2 things to be proved. Firstly, that there was something that you might consider to be spying-esque going on, and the DPP says, the men deny this, the DPP says, yeah, we thought we had pretty strong evidence on that, but it also required that who they were spying for was a threat to our country. Now, when this case was brought, when the CPS made that charging decision, they believed, yes, we do. Now, why did they believe that then? Presumably because government officials under the last Conservative government had said, look, when you get to court, we will furnish you with the witness statement you need, the sworn witness statement necessary to prove that. Something has changed between then and now. One thing that's changed is the colour of the rosette upon which this government was elected. Keir Starmer has walked in, and for whatever reason, the CPS now can no longer get that classification, that civil servant, to come to court.
But they're saying, look, but they never were. It's very clear that Stephen Parkinson, the DPP now, is saying, you know, they no longer can, as in they had it at some point.
But Julia, that is an allegation, by the way, that Labour would criticise, and I'll tell you for why. The Prime Minister is insinuating that a Crown prosecutor, who works in the very department that he used to lead, grotesquely, recklessly charged 2 individuals with one of the most serious crimes in the country on the basis of evidence that he never had. If a CPS Crown prosecutor has done this, and by the way, the decisions around these cases are taken by the most senior prosecutors, if a Crown prosecutor had done that, he deserves to be turfed out of office, he deserves to be stripped of his solicitor's qualifications, and he should never work in the legal profession again. There is a reason that the Prime Minister is not calling for that to happen. It's because he knows that that Crown prosecutor took that decision on the basis of assurances he'd had at the time, and that those assurances have been withdrawn. The Prime Minister is smearing prosecutors who work at the department that he used to lead. It is disgraceful, it is deplorable, and above all, it is incredibly hypocritical, because this is the Prime Minister who says, oh no, you can't criticise the people
it's terrible.
that work in these legal departments, they're making decisions independently. No, you can't have it both ways, Keir.
Oh, well, he always wants it both ways.
We smell a rat, we see through you, you're lying to us yet again.
And they've got form on China, we know this, in terms of the absurd decision over the Chagos Islands. And once again, whose tentacles, whose fingers are in there? Jonathan Powles, former National Security Advisor, senior advisor to Blair. I mean, again, I would say, definitely bringing the band back together. And they've got Tim Allen, who used to be, Blair's, one of his key director of communications, number 2.
And who did they have out in Washington? Peter Mandelson, who was in a number of reports, was China's biggest advocate within government.
Forget his links with Jeffrey Epstein and nice letters and wandering around in bathrobes on his island. No. For me, his links with China alone meant he was a security risk. And this is the thing. You and I both know our universities have been bought up by China, Qatar and other places, but China being the particular threat on that front. We know we've got this big battle over the Chinese embassy they want to build, which is like anyone with half a brain has gone, this giant Chinese embassy will become the Chinese spy capital of Europe. This is madness. And the government's going, oh, we might override the local Tower Hamlets Council ruling on that. We've got this sort of, oh, please can we come over for a trade delegation? We know that Jonathan Powell has had numerous meetings with Chinese leaders. They'll think, well, we're putting British national interests ahead of these things. No, I'm sorry, you're not, because British national interests aren't just economic, they are security-led. This is an enemy country. They have sanctioned some of our parliamentarians, for goodness sake. It's really Duncan Smith, Tom Tugendhat and others. It is untenable that we should continue. I mean, yes, let's keep talking. Jaw, better than war. But China is helping Russia, which is bombing our ally, Ukraine. I mean, which part of this are you finding complicated?
Julia, I want to let our audience into a secret. When people go into government, they take big jobs like Director of Communications, big jobs like Mandelson had in government, big jobs like Jonathan Powell. At some point, they get booted out of office. And then they're sitting, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for what to do.
To make some money.
And they want to make some money. And they go, more often than not, in fact, off to the highest bidder, which turns out to be foreign governments that are a little bit dodgy. Now, I'm picking my words carefully here. A bunch of the guys that had big jobs in the Blair administration went off to despotic, pretty shady regimes around the world. Now,
I mean, Tony Blair hasn't been shy about some,
quite.
Never met a foreign despot he doesn't like.
A few mil off this or that stan somewhere in the Caucasus.
He loves the stands.
Now, that would have been fine. I mean, a bit shady, if it wasn't the fact that all of these guys that had been in Blair had come straight back into government, and they're making decisions that just happen again and again to favour their old dodgy clients.
And not just do that, they damage Britain. I mean, there's definitely more to be seen here. There always is. Whenever damage, we're like, oh, there's no story here. There's always a story. Love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. And again, wake up to Islamofascism threat on our streets and abroad. Wake up to the Chinese threat. Wake up to the Russian threat. Everyone needs to just wake up. This whole centrist dad, if we could just chat to people and trade with people, everything's fine. You are living in cloud cuckoo land. You're the ones who got us into this mess. We are going to have to get ourselves out. Everybody needs a wake-up call about the threats we are facing at home and abroad. And anyone who's not paying attention and not waking up to that threat, you are also part of the problem. And it's as simple as that. And people like us have been talking about this. We go, oh, what are you going on about? What's the problem? Here's the problem. And in a few years' time, when China takes over Taiwan, we have to decide, what do we do? You think Ukraine war, you think lockdown damaged our economy and we're still trying to pay all that off right now? That's the basis of everything, every economic conversation in this conversation. You ain't seen nothing yet. It's just madness. It really is. Let's talk about something else going on internationally. Just want to touch on the internationals very briefly, because we're going to talk to a guest about this in just a few moments as well. But there has been these talks in Egypt over Gaza. We have seen an exchange of the names of the prisoners and the hostages between the two sides. The big names, the big players are flying in today. That could give us some hope that there could be a deal. I mean, October the 7th, yes, it's the second anniversary of that horrific massacre. But the aftermath of that, I mean, I was so appalled yesterday watching a load of these protests that we saw on our streets. University campuses, Jewish students harassed. We had, pro-Palestine protesters shutting down Tower Bridge, making blatantly, openly genocidal chants. We had this woman who apparently is funded by us with grants, who cut down yellow ribbons for Israeli hostages in Gaza. She's a taxpayer-funded student. We're paying for her. We're paying for this woman. The BBC put out an internal memo just referring to the October 7th attacks as escalations in the Israel-Gaza war. The October 7th was just an escalation. It was just a couple more rockets, wasn't it? I mean, if you don't think that some of these institutions are just and just ingrained with anti-Semitism, you're just not paying attention. Got this NHS doctor. This is Rama Al-Adwan. She posted a tweet glorifying the terror attack. Blatantly. Then sent me a message saying, "Don't spend that £7,000 too quickly." Apparently, anyone who's supporting Israel versus murderous terrorists, it's not been a difficult moral call for me, I'm not going to lie. Apparently we're getting paid. I'm telling you, I would be so rich if I got paid to give my opinions over and above. I get a payment for doing this job, and I'm allowed to give any sodding opinion I feel, and I only give the ones I honestly feel. If I don't, if I was told to give a different opinion, I can assure you I would say no. I'm pretty sure my bosses would attest to that. It is just extraordinary what's happened. Very, very few arrests, if any. The police just standing by as people dressed as terrorists, literally dressed up as terrorists, masked, shout horrific anti-Semitic things. This is happening on our streets, it's happening on our campuses. Students who, I mean, frankly, I'm not Jewish, but if I was a student at university and that was happening, I would be intimidated. I'd feel I can't speak freely without fear of attack. This cannot be allowed to go on. And Keir Starmer says he wants to make the Jewish community feel safe. He doesn't make the Jewish community feel safe. They don't feel safe, and rightly so, because this is now exploding in our faces. We need to get on top of this again, today, right now, this hour.
Last week I had to walk through Liverpool Street Station just after 2 Jews had been brutally murdered on Yom Kippur by someone who apparently is an Islamic extremist. There was There was a protest there of pro-Palestinians, pretty frankly anti-Jewish people, who were stood no more than 5 metres away from the Kindertransport statues that commemorates the Jewish refugees that came to this country fleeing the Holocaust, children that came to this country. We all saw films about it, we all saw clips about it, we all cried about it when we watched those films. I certainly did. And I felt like crying again when I walked through Liverpool Street. I saw the sickness, the rot, the evil that has seeped into our national character. And these people shame us. They belittle our national identity. They betray the sense of fairness and decency that this country has been known for decades, if not centuries. And as far as I am concerned, if any of these people are here on visas, we need to be doing exactly what the US has done and sending them straight back home. We don't want them here. We don't like it. They need to go.
It's a lot of young Brits, and it's not just it's not just sort of Muslims who've been radicalised. It is young white Brits, atheist Christians who've also been radicalised. And we need to get to the heart of this. What is going on in our education system, in universities, in schools, what's going on the BBC is broad sweep anti-Semitism on a daily basis. And if we don't tackle that, we are rotting in the core of our nation, and we've got to get on top of it. It's as simple as that. Look, there's so much more I want to talk about. We're going to take a quick break because we have got a guest I want to talk about whether we've got any update on this this possible deal. As if by the way, releasing the hostages and ending the war in Gaza will in any way stop any of these anti-Semitic voices in the UK. I fear it won't. We're also going to be talking after that about Kemi Badenoch's big day at party conference. Will she deliver the speech that will convince party members and indeed often her own shadow cabinet, we're told, that she is the right person for the job? That's up next. Don't forget to give us a call as well on 0344 499 1000. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the big stories we're talking about. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Still with me is Sam Armstrong. Joined right now, live from Israel, is Dr. Einat Wilf, who's an Israeli commentator and former member of the Israeli Labour Party in the Israeli Parliament. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Einat.
Thank you for having me.
Developments, I mean, in the last hour or two are very interesting in Egypt, where we're seeing those peace talks about Trump's 20-point peace plan take place between Israelis and Hamas officials. And Hamas said they have now given Israel a list of prisoners that they want exchanged for the hostages. And we know that some of the big names, Steve Witkoff, Qatari Prime Minister and others, flying in today. How hopeful are you that a peace deal of some sort is close?
I will separate between a peace deal. I think that is too big a name for what is being discussed, especially since that deal does not address any of the real true root causes of the conflict. It only, like in very general words, addresses the fundamental ideology of what I've come to call Palestinianism, the singular obsession with the non-existence of a Jewish state. The plan does little to nothing to address that. The thing that most Israelis care about is whether the first part will happen. This is something that the Palestinians and Hamas did not agree to previously, which is to release all the hostages at the first stage and then discuss everything later. This is what Israelis are very much hoping to hear that will happen. Israelis are very much hoping to learn that there is enough pressure placed so that will happen. Even though it's tough, Israelis are willing to ransom the hostages by releasing hardened Palestinian butchers from Israeli jail. But this is something that by and large, most Israelis are willing to do as long as we get all the hostages immediately.
It's the number one issue, and I was in Israel recently, and it's just all encompassing, the need to get the hostages back alive and dead. Of course, Hamas, it was reported last week, had accepted a yes, but it was yes, but. And the but was huge because they didn't actually agree to most of the key demands. For instance, the giving up of their arms, accepting that they will have no future in any future governance of the Gaza Strip. I mean, this is so basic to the 20-point plan. Is that meaningful at all?
Of course. I mean, it's a crazy house of cards. Basically, what happened is the American president issued an ultimatum to Hamas to say yes to the plan. Hamas said yes to something completely different. Like you indicated, like they uttered the word yes, but if you read what they said yes to, they said yes to what they always said yes to from the beginning, which is essentially a form of Israeli surrender in exchange for getting all the hostages. So Hamas said yes to something completely different, which effectively, of course, is a no to the Trump plan. President Trump decided to hear that Hamas said yes to his plan. And then he basically told Israel to pretend that Hamas said yes to his plan and to behave accordingly. So it's all a crazy house of cards.
But is this all down to the Nobel Peace Prize being on offer on Friday and he just wants to get it over the line? Is this about Donald Trump's ego or is this about peace in the Middle East?
Seriously, at this point, I can tell you most Israelis don't care. If we can get all the hostages immediately, let him get the Nobel Prize in physics and chemistry and literature, as far as we're concerned. Then everything else can be discussed. This is the issue. Can we get all of them now? This has not been possible in the past. The question is enough pressure being placed on Qatar, on Turkey, on Egypt, on those supporters of Palestinianism to finally tell Hamas enough is enough. Holding the hostages is no longer an asset. It's a liability. Hand them over.
And what did you make of, obviously, the decisions in the past month or so of Britain, France, Canada, Australia and others to basically, say we recognise the legitimate, Palestinian state without any requirement that hostages were released before that recognition came, and what we've seen in the last few days, and I think we've seen it in America and we've seen it in other countries, but I have to say, focusing on just what's been happening in Britain, quite the most extraordinary celebrations of what happened 2 years ago in Israel. People, doctors, an NHS doctor at my local hospital, in fact, celebrating the Intifada, celebrating the martyrs of October the 7th, and by which they mean the murderous, raping, hostage-taking terrorists who invaded your country. What does that tell you as an Israeli and as a Israeli politician about, well, where Israel sits now?
So first of all, what we saw on October 7th, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think more and more people are beginning to see what these so-called demonstrations are really about. The fact that they took place on October 7th, which is designed to be a complete erasure of what was done to the Jews on that day. The fact that they were celebratory really tells you everything you need to know. Even in Gaza, the voices that are coming out are between celebrating that day or at most saying that it's too bad it didn't work out as it should have. Yeah. But that's it. There is no remorse. There's only celebration. There's only saying we'll do it again. What you spoke about, the recognition of Palestine, is a combination of, I shall say, ignorance, cowardice, to really not understand at this point that the Palestinian cause is not what Westerners, I call it West-plaining, it's not what they want it to be, a people seeking self-determination and freedom and a piece of land. It is the cause of erasure and undoing of Jewish sovereignty. This is why it only ever breeds groups that try to use violence to achieve it. And we saw it on display yesterday. And again, I hope it's not wishful thinking. I believe more and more people in Britain, Canada, the US, France are beginning to say, this is not what we want for our countries.
I like to think we are. I like to think people are waking up, that these people are simply not what they say they are, and they are just anti-Semitic, full stop. Just finally, Einat, do you think that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, so President Netanyahu, that he is actually doing a good job in terms of the war in Gaza, his bid to get the hostages back? If you've been a politician, you've been a senior figure in governments, would you have done anything differently?
Certainly. I separate between what I call Netanyahu the politician, to which I have tremendous criticism. I think the war has been waged against the wrong enemy. We lied, the trap that Hamas is separate from Palestinianism. We didn't understand that the war is not really waged in Gaza. It's waged in the streets of London, for people's minds, on the screens, that it is a far bigger issue. I have many criticisms about the way that the war was waged and the mistakes that have been done that have led us to the point that, think about it, Hamas is still in a position to dictate terms. We should have been in a position where they beg to give us the hostages rather than dictate terms. Tells you, again, everything you need to know about their various libels about genocide and such. Yeah. It was, if anything, it was a genocidal effort from their side. But I separate my criticism of Netanyahu, the politician, and his waging of the war, which is, I think certainly in Gaza has been incompetent, to what I call Netanyahu the excuse, which is what I find many people use as an excuse and a scapegoat and a way to walk a line of saying the worst things about Israel. They just say it about Netanyahu, and thereby wash their hands of it. So there's a lot of scapegoating and excusing when it comes to Netanyahu. I have tremendous criticism within Israel about how the war could have been better waged.
Dr. Einat Wilfer, Israeli commentator, former Labour member of the Israeli Parliament. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. 10:33 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll be talking about what's happening at Tory party conference. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong is with me. We're going to be talking about Tory party conference, but also what's going on with Labour and this spy case. And I'll get Sam's thoughts on it after we speak to James Mathewson. He's a former Labour Party spokesman, very much not a member of the Labour Party anymore, as you're always keen to point out, James. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for clarifying that.
I know you always like me to. Now, look, I just want to ask you first of all about this China spy case, because we've got a war of words between the current Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Punksett, and the former Director of Public Prosecutions, now the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, over who's responsible for the collapse of this spy case. Must point out that the two men who've been alleged to have been spies do deny all charges, Christopher Barry and Chris Cash. But the Chief Prosecutor, the DPP, basically says the government collapsed this trial because they wouldn't provide the evidence, which he believes it does exist, that they believe China to be an enemy state. But the Prime Minister says that's not true. Who do you believe, the current or the former DPP?
I think it's very difficult at the moment. I mean, I obviously don't understand the kind of technicalities of the case, as I'm not an expert in this area of law.
I don't think the Prime Minister does.
Well, I don't think any of them do. I think there's a general fear of China in general. I find this in Westminster quite a lot. On the Tory side, you see that kind of manifest as a kind of saber rattle, and we need to be strong. We need to kind of go against the China and everything. On the Labour side, there's this idea of international trade deals coming before security and defence, which is always quite questionable. And there's always been an issue on the Labour side, funnily enough, of defence issues and being strong on language. You're okay to do it with Putin, right? That's kind of like well-trodden ground. You can do it with Putin. But when it comes to other countries, the likes of China, which is a kind of rising threat and has been considered to be a rising threat by most of our allies, there's always a discomfort around it, which I've always found interesting.
It's because we do a lot more trade with China. I mean, that's the reality. It's about the money. But again, a lot of people are very wary of this, aren't they? Can I ask you about the Tory conference? Because obviously Kemi Badenoch in less than an hour is going to be giving her big keynote speech. A lot of people are talking about she won't make it past the May local elections, when both your old lot, Labour, and the Tories are expected to get an absolute trouncing by parties like Reform and probably Lib Dems and I don't know whatever the Jezbollah party is called, the Greens, whoever. We often have these sort of protest votes, but there's even talk that she could face a shadow cabinet, an attempt to oust her even before then. What do you make of the threat to the two biggest parties from the parties sort of supposedly to the left and to the right? Is that something to be welcomed? The end would appear. This has been prophesied before, of the two-party politics in this country.
Yeah, I would with caution say that it's the end of it. It's certainly they're under threat at the moment, but they have this kind of wonderful ability, because of our political system benefiting Labour and the Tories, to bounce back from this. And unless significant changes are made to our voting system and the way that we do elections, then I don't see it being a huge threat. You've got to remember as well as our kind of elected legislature, we've got things like the House of Lords that complicate things even more when it comes to the matter. But I do think that overall, it should be a lesson for the Tories and for Labour. It's one that that Labour seem to have been aware of, at least in the last couple of weeks. They've tailored their message. They're trying to adjust it to fit the threat of reform. But the problem is with the Tories, I still don't see them taking that seriously. And the irony is, reform were a product of the Tories. They're a product. They came from the belly of that beast because of the Brexit issue, because of various other issues. The Eurosceptic wing of the Tory party broke off. And without that kind of collapse in the Tory vote, you wouldn't have seen that swell in reform. And we're seeing every week, it's not even a news story anymore, the Conservative councillors are crossing the floor and joining reform. So it will be a question eventually of who has more sway, who is the predominant right-wing party in British politics and centre-right politics. Is it reform or is it the Tory party? We'll have to see what happens.
Well, we shall see what happens there. A lot of criticism of the Shadow Justice Secretary in the last few days, again, by, I would say, the usual suspects, over what we had Robert Jenrick saying about a visit to Hamsworth in Birmingham, where he talked about how, you know, they didn't see another white face and saying it looked like a slum, and he said it's one of the worst integrated places. He also said it's not about, you know, skin colour or faith.
Oh, yeah.
It was... Well, I mean, he categorically stated that. He's now being accused of fueling toxic nationalism. I don't know why nationalism is toxic, but...
Well, toxic nationalism is. That's a different kind of nationalism. You can have nationalism, you can have toxic nationalism, you know, it's just the fact that it's toxic. And when you're saying it's not about skin colour, when he says that, but then in the same breath, he said, I didn't see another white face. What does that mean?
Well, he didn't see another white face. That's what it means.
But what
he went to an area in Birmingham where he didn't see another white face. This is a 91. This Handsworth is a 91% ethnic minority populated area. And it's largely Muslim, but there's actually other groups as well. But he's pointed out that, you know, we don't have integration and multinational. What we've got is areas which are completely separate, living parallel lives. He said, I want to live in a country where people are properly integrated. It's not about the colour of your skin or your faith. He says, but I want people to be living alongside each other, not parallel lives.
But it is
What's
about
not to like about that? Sort of thing Martin Luther King would have said.
No, but it is about the colour of your skin, though, isn't it? Because he's made that assessment on the fact that he's not seen any white faces. How many of those non-white faces that he saw were British?
Well, but he wasn't pointing out that they weren't British. In fact, actually, that ward has a very high number of people who come from abroad. It's got something like, I think, 17% of people who don't speak English. It's not their first. Well, about 37%, I think, don't speak as their first language, and about half of those, according to the official stats, don't speak English well or at all. So what he pointed out was all absolutely true. Is pointing out facts, is that toxic? Is that racist?
Yes, if you're using them in the way that he's using them.
How did he use them?
Pointing facts out like that. Because he didn't go to rural Northumberland, where I'm from, and say, my God, there's not any brown faces around here.
We're a white country. We are historically a white country.
Right, Julia, that's where we get into an issue here.
Because that's a fact.
We start conflating skin colour and race
with
our culture
you just
and our
mentioned...
identity.
No, I'm not conflating race and skin colour with our... No, it is a matter of fact that the vast majority of people in this country now and have always been white, and it's only recently that we've had a large influx in the last few decades, in fact, particularly in the last 2 decades, of people who are not white. We are a white country, in the same way that Nigeria is a black country, and India, people are Asian, or of Indian ethnicity. This is not complicated for any other country.
There aren't people going around in Nigeria, are there, and looking for white faces and saying, "Ooh, we're not sure."
But hold on a minute. We have people sort of, various, the National Trust or whatever. All these people saying, "Oh, there aren't enough white people in the countryside." We have people like Jon Snow, and he was on Channel 4 complaining that he'd never seen so many white faces at a Brexit march. I mean, so it is actually commented on all the time as somehow a bad thing. He wasn't saying it was a bad thing that there were people of colour. He was pointing out that they were. This was a community living a parallel life.
I understand why you need to go to the lengths that you do to defend Robert Jenrick on this.
I'm not going to any lengths.
Why are you defending him on it?
Why wouldn't I defend someone saying facts?
Why do you feel that Robert Jenrick, in doing this, which is something that the majority of people I've spoken to, by the way, were like, "Oh, that's awful. That's not nice."
What was awful? I don't understand what was awful about it.
And yet you feel the need to come out with some big defence of him because you think he's just speaking facts, right?
No, I feel the need always to defend people saying things. Telling
most of us wouldn't speak like that because it doesn't matter to me what the colour of the faces of the people are on the street. It does to you, and I've just got to ask you why. Because
it doesn't. It doesn't matter to me the colour of the people on the street. What matters is whether we have communities that are integrated and living alongside each other and sharing the same culture. There is ample evidence, numerous government reports, numerous reports by think tanks that have shown that actually we are not an integrated society. We have effectively ghettos of people from different faith and religion, faith and ethnic backgrounds living separate parallel lives.
I ask you what those people of colour could be doing to show Robert Jenrick and to show you who are bothered about it that they're supposedly integrated, regardless of their national identity.
Well, I would suggest a large number of them being able to speak English might be a good idea.
Okay, but that's 17%. You've already said that's a minority, so that's not
quite a lot of people in one little ward.
In one ward, yeah, absolutely. But the majority, it's not the case. Would you like to see them, when you see these people taking on British culture and supposedly becoming integrated, do you want to see them in church?
Well, I mean, the vast majority of people in this country don't go to church. That's not the point.
I'm not going to a church. I don't believe in God.
No, neither do I. So that wouldn't be part of it.
What do you want to see them do?
What do we want to see people do? What I think what he means, he can come on and speak for himself, is what he means.
No, I'm asking you.
No, I'm asking what would I like? I think I would like people like you to accept that there is actually a history of this country which is not based on diversity and multiculturalism.
You would like me to accept that we're a white nation? Accept
the fact of our history and the people of this country.
Who do you identify with? The Saxons or the Romans or the Danes? Which one are you identifying?
Well, I'm half Irish heritage, so I don't really know. Okay. But I don't identify with a lot of the multicultural identities that we do now have in this country. I identify as British and English. That's what I identify as.
Well, Julia, I've got bad news for you about British and English, because unfortunately, historically, we have been a huge melting pot.
You see, again, that's just not true. That's just not true. The level of immigration to this country until the Blair years was in the low thousands a year. In some years, there was net immigration.
When we talk about English, what are we? Because when I come from Northumbria and I look at my DNA and I look at my history, I'm Scandinavian, right? Because it's all Vikings and the Danelaw, everyone who came across here. People in the south of England, a lot of the times, they've been there for a long time and they talk about their heritage and their history.
Not been there for a long time. British people for millennia, for centuries.
Not millennia, no.
Yes, millennia. Yeah,
no, not millennia, Julia. People haven't been here for millennia. This is the problem.
Millennia. You don't think anyone lived in this country 2,000 years ago? Mate, the Romans invaded. We were here then.
You don't know, but the idea of this modern English or British culture and idea, the idea of that being millennia. Oh, people who are wearing Thor's hammer necklaces, Julia. People who are praying to different gods. The idea of Christianity and modern English culture existing for millennia is nonsense.
Well, again, I don't think you understand the word millennia for a start. I'm going to have to leave it here, partly because it's just unbelievably frustrating to talk to someone who doesn't know the most basic facts about history, James, but also because time is out. But I'm sure we'll speak again. We didn't get to quite a lot of the other things, including the anti-Semitism on the streets, but I'm sure we'll come to that another time. James Matthewson, former Labour Party spokesman, does not speak for the Labour Party. Sam Armstrong, you're huffing and puffing there. You've got close links with Robert Jenrick. You ran his leadership campaign last time around. Just a quick response before I go to a break.
They start by telling you can't say basic common facts, observations about what you see, and then they end up in the same way, telling you that there's no such thing as English, there's no such thing as British, you don't exist. You people don't exist. You're not allowed to make observations. You're not allowed to believe in yourself. The British people are fiction. English people are fiction. There is nothing.
We're always multi-ethnic, multicultural. Everyone knows that.
And Pakistani people and Indian people and all the rest of them, they're an identity. They exist. We don't exist. We don't count. Shut up and just take what's coming for you.
Shut up, brackets, racist, close brackets. I mean, that's
you just heard it.
That's the reality. That's the underlying thing. Again, what's fascinating about the left in this country, the only nationalism, the only nation state they believe in is Palestine. It's literally the only one they believe in. No one else gets one.
English people didn't exist. Stonehenge just fell from the blooming sky. Give over. Just go away.
Who was subjugated by the Romans? It is but it is literally unbelievable. If you had basic stats of what people look like in this country and what their ethnic, where they derive from over the centuries, we know it's we had censuses, we have a record of this stuff, and I absolutely have no issue with there being more black or brown people in this country. But I do think, as Jenrick pointed out, we do have an issue of a failure of integration between different communities. And if you come to this country, your family came to this country, and there are some which are very, very well integrated, and there's not been an issue with at all, and accepting British culture, supporting British culture, being part of British culture, and others that are not doing that successfully. But pointing that out makes you a bad person. Well, I will still go to any others to defend any politician of any political hue who states facts and then gets derided for them. 10:50 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to talk about small matter of the economy. What Kemi Badenoch wants to do to sort it out, and why Keir Starmer's big mates in the EU aren't helping him out when it comes to steel exports.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:54 is the time. Let's get straight to my next guest, David Buick. He's a financial advisor and markets commentator at Aquis Exchange. Very good morning to you, David.
Morning, Empress. You'll have a heart attack if you carry on like that. Love the dialogue. Though.
It's
wonderful.
painful. It's just painful, isn't it? Look, let me just talk to you very quickly. British steel faces a disaster, we're told, because the EU is imposing 50% tariffs. We managed to negotiate them down with Donald Trump in America, but it seems that Keir Starmer's big mates in the EU aren't going to help him out when it comes to our exports to Europe.
Doesn't look like it because of the tariffs imposed by the United States on the European Union. are greater than the ones that they're imposing on us.
And they're a bigger export market for us as well, aren't they?
I mean, we import, I think, 3.7 million tons worth of steel from the European Union, but we also export 1.9 billion to the European Union from this country, which presumably is for different types of steels, hence the differential. Otherwise, you think, well, that's crazy. But it is going to affect British Steel very badly. I mean, as we know, all their furnaces, whether they be in South Wales or in Scunthorpe or wherever they are under huge financial duress and are hanging in there by a thread.
And we're going to be the ones who end up bailing them out because we cannot allow all our steelworks to collapse. What with, wars approaching, etc.
Well, yes, but I mean, there again, Chris Donald, who's the minister in charge of this, he's got a lot of talking to do. I'm not certain how much experience he's got, but, it's going to be a very, very tough negotiation, and there'll have to be a quid pro quo somewhere else, because if this is implemented, it is very dangerous. And of course, you have to think of the other things like Jaguar Land Rover just got over the most horrendous stoppage through cyber attacks. And also, if you think about it, the other, what I call ancillary industries that support British Steel.
Yeah.
So it's not just a question of, the furnaces and what's produced and what's exported and export. It's all the ancillary business.
Yeah, and there are just so many businesses that do. I mean, by the way, Jaguar Land Rover perhaps should have had cybersecurity insurance. Just throwing that out there. It might have been a grown-up thing for them to do rather than worrying about queer people in their adverts, but there we are. Let me talk about what Kemi Badenoch's going to say, because Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, she's just arriving at Tory conference, she's getting through security quicker than most people, it would appear. She's giving a big speech due to start around 11:15. She's not often on time, so we'll see whether that happens or not. Apparently, well, I mean, that's there's Kemi time. I mean, that's what people say. But she's going to be announcing today she wants to plug the country's financial black hole using what she calls a new golden economic rule. Some £47 billion in spending cuts. Half of that saving will go off to pay the deficit off, because we're paying a fortune in interest on those debts, but also half of it to boosted growth with things like tax cuts. Do those numbers add up?
Well, I think they're doable. I mean, the one thing is, Julia, is that, what life is going to be like in 4 years' time, which is the earliest possible time that the Tories might get back. And that seems extremely unlikely unless there's some kind of coalition with Reform. The idea is a good idea, but you and I have absolutely no idea what dire straits the economy might be in, or conversely, if there is some improvement.
Yeah.
But to actually suggest that over a 5-year period, you're going to make £47 billion worth of desperately needed cuts in public expenditure, that isn't overambitious as far as I'm concerned. And the idea that half of it should be paid, towards the interest payments that we pay on our gargantuan debt of £2.8 trillion is a very good idea as far as I'm concerned. And it will give incentives to business, industry and commerce if they offer tax incentives to the right people, like fintech, any kind of technology. We need to give aspirations and encouragement.
But also, getting rid of that hike on national insurance payments for employing people, which is mad. But as you say, to a certain extent, this is a bit like you come into a windfall, if you could, but paying off part of the mortgage. As opposed to just going on another holiday. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it?
It's a perfect analogy. I think it's a sensible thing to set before conference today. I think it's not too ambitious, but it's not too ridiculous either. So, we need something to smile about, all of us. I mean, I don't care what anybody's political hue or colour is. The fact is, we want success in this country, and we're not getting it. So we need to find some way through the murky outlook. And I like the idea of this sort of thing. And who knows, maybe Labour might adopt something that is remotely sensible like this in some time during the course of the next 4 years.
They may not.
We can't go on the way we are.
Well, they may not have the choice. We've got that budget coming up in November, haven't we? David Buick, I'm sure we'll talk to you many more times before then. Thank you very much indeed. Really quick word for Sam Armstrong. I promise we'll talk about this more in the next half hour. But I mean, Kemi Badenoch got a big job, not just for her leadership, but also to be an alternative to Reform and an alternative to Labour.
Yeah, and in the last few moments, a More in Common poll has come out that shows the gap between her and Reform widening by 4 points, 33 free now for reform in that hole that they haven't done so well in historically. That's the problem she's got.
And I think it was very, very obvious, was it not, with those attacks from Keir Starmer on reform. The reform would go up in the polls and Labour would go down, and that doesn't help the Tories at all. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. Plenty more coming up, lots more Top Gus. Do stay tuned. Don't forget, we'll get to your calls as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for your company. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, and we are the home of common sense. We do our best. I mean, as I say, someone's got to. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device, it is fantastic to have your company. And you do miss anything of the show, and you've missed a stonking first hour, I have to say, then do go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has arrived at conference today. She's about to give her keynote speech to the conference this morning in what is described as a make or break moment for her leadership. Plus, we'll be talking more about the anniversary of October 7th, the Hamas massacre yesterday, when 1,000+ people joined anti-Israeli protests across the country, posted the most outrageous anti-Semitic things, stood on the streets, stood in university campuses shouting slogans such as "Long live the Intifada." What does that mean? It means it's a call for more massacres of Jews. That's literally what it means. And where are all the charges? Where are the police charges? Meanwhile, the BBC, which is, I think, responsible in part for the rise in anti-Semitism in the country, so ingrained is it with anti-Semitism inside that it's had to apologise for an internal memo sent to staff describing the October 7th attacks as, I kid you not, escalations in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Yeah, that's what that massacre was, the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, just an escalation. It is extraordinary. Also illustrated the memo with a picture of Palestinian women and children navigating rubble in Gaza, rather than one of the many, many victims of that Hamas atrocity. What is going on at the heart of our BBC? Plus, to add to the general madness of this week, Sir Lenny Henry, who used to be a comedian, funny or not, you decide, has called for Britain to pay slavery reparations to this country's black population. The comedian backed demands from Caribbean nations for £18 trillion in reparations, but also called for money to be given to individual black Britons, paid for presumably in part by British taxpayers who are black here. Not quite sure how that all works out, but we'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides coming up. And joining me for all the chat is commentator Sam Armstrong. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Where do we even start? Every day I'm like, where do we start? Can we start with Tory Party conference?
Yeah.
Kemi Badenoch, about to give her keynote speech. These speeches are always later than they say they are, even when it doesn't involve Kemi Badenoch, who does have an issue with timekeeping. Trust me on this.
I was backstage yesterday and they were running 10 to 15 minutes behind, and the poor people that make Conservative Party conference work were tearing their hairs out even then. I suspect it will be worse today.
Yeah, but also there'll be a lot of people who are leaving after the speech, and people are literally sitting there going, I need to get my train, I need to get my train. We're not going to take the speech live. We'll give you anything specific that she has to say. And we know that she's going to be talking a lot about this sort of golden rule, about fixing the black hole. And she's going to be sort of, saying, look, we have all these, we can try and make all these cuts, and then some of it's going to go to paying off debt, and some of it's going to be going to tax cuts to sort out the economy. But that's 4 years away if there's another election, realistically, in 2029. Realistically, does anyone think she's still going to be leader at that time? Because we've got the May local elections in which the Tories and Labour are likely to be trounced, but also, crucially, we've got even shadow cabinet members who are wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. I think it's, only 35 Tory MPs would have to send...
Yeah, and they've doubled the threshold to make it easier for her to survive.
Yeah, because there's so few Tory MPs.
That's right.
Look, your man who you campaigned for, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, you campaigned for his leadership last year. I mean, let's be honest, he's on manoeuvres.
Well, I don't accept that, actually. And
was anyone convinced by that?
Well, look, people were saying that he's going to go into conference and do an Andy Burnham type routine, and he hasn't. He gave his speech. He's actually given, frankly, what's quite a modest set of fringe events, mostly seeming to be around a number of quite actually funny jokes that he's made, and that seems to be the bit that we got picked up. Some of them, I have to say, we couldn't broadcast in daytime radio because they had some fruity language, shall we say, about Palestinian protesters and the people who make up this cabinet.
I can't even tell you how much I've had to edit myself over the last week. I can't even tell you.
Yes, quite. He hasn't edited himself, and that's been his focus. However, look, the situation for Kemi Badenoch is everybody, including her, accepts is not where they would have wished it to be. When she came into office, there were 5 points clear of reform. There's a poll just out in the last few minutes by More in Common. It's the most favourable pollster consistently to the Tories, and it puts the lead at 14 points. That's up 4 points on last week that reform has over Kemi Badenoch. The effect so far of the Conservative Party conference, it has to be said, is that the poll ratings have gone down and not up.
However, that is the thing,
she's got a big speech to come. The Tory party have always felt most comfortable competing on economic grounds. Now, Liz Truss has damaged that reputation, but by and large, I think people in this country still believe that if you've got a choice of who's going to run the economy, Labour or Conservative, they believe that Conservatives will run it better, certainly than Rachel from accounts or customer relations or whatever it is this week.
Literally anyone could. I did economics A level. I reckon I could run the economy better.
Well, quite. So this is her big moment. There's a lot riding on this speech, and the reaction in not just in the media, but in the polls over the next few weeks is going to be very, very consequential for Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we had lots of talk, will there be a pact or not? I think that would damage both the Tories and Reform. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is in India, is on a 2-day sort of big sort of trade. Now, here's the thing. In my day, when I was a political journalist full-time, there was a convention that basically the other parties, whether you're in government or not, basically zipped it.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to minor parties.
Yeah, exactly. But they would stay stum during other parties. It's a matter of courtesy to other parties. But that doesn't seem to be. I mean, the gloves are absolutely off, aren't they?
Yeah, look, and one of the disadvantages that Kemi Badenoch has got is the entire lobby have flown out now to go see what Keir Starmer's doing in India. And if he goes and makes news in India, boom,
This goes
that's off the 6 o'clock news, that's off the 10 o'clock news. People just aren't even going to see what she's got to say.
Well, again, there's an element, isn't there? I know that we took, on the station took, Keir Starmer's speech live and Nigel Farage's, but not Kemi Baden. I mean, partly it depends on the time of day, but also genuinely, I mean, how. With all due, I really like Kemi as a person. I think she genuinely has a lot of useful stuff to say, and she's been very brave on some issues, not so brave on other issues, ahead of the curve of a lot of politicians. But does it really matter what Kemi Badenoch says in her Tory party conference speech today? Not really, no.
Kemi Badenoch's biggest problem over the last year is that too few of the public know who she is, too few of the public know what she stands for, and too few of the public are yet ready to forgive the Conservative Party for their record in government.
Too soon.
Unless something is going to change, the Conservative Party is just going to fade out.
It's very interesting, isn't it? They're still counting on that it's all going to be okay. Let's talk about this China spy case, though, because this is still that. I mean, let's not go into all the details. With so much more I want to talk about, and I want to get to your calls. Do give us a call 0344 499 1000 to have your say on any of the stories we're talking about. I have to say this bit: calls are charged at the national rate, text costs 1, standard network rate. Message. There are so many different stories. I don't want to ask a specific question. I'm leaving it open to you. Talk about what you want to talk about. But we've got Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions. He's basically the Chief Prosecutor for this country, for the Crown Prosecution Service. He's blaming the government for the collapse of this China spying trial. These are two men, Christopher Berry and Chris Cash, accused of passing secrets to Beijing. They have, of course, denied all charges, but the trial has collapsed because, despite many months of requests, the government failed to produce crucial evidence that as was required, that show that China was a threat to national security, was an enemy state. Now, the government says, no, it wasn't our fault. And the Prime Minister himself, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, says that basically they couldn't have brought that evidence because at the time when these alleged crimes took place, 2022, 2023, under the Tories, China was not designated a threat to national security. Now, A, why wasn't it? I think people like me were on air calling for them to be designated as that. And B, we've got the Director of Public Prosecutions currently and the former Director of Public Prosecutions, who's now the Prime Minister, directly contradicting each other. One of them is lying. Which one is it?
Let's be blunt. The Director of Public Prosecutions of this country has called Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, a liar. Both of these stories cannot be true. Now, I know that Keir Starmer has got a very good reason to lie about this. I know that Stephen Parkinson doesn't have a very good reason to lie about it. You might think that would be deleterious to his career that relies on carrying the Prime Minister's confidence. So we're in an extraordinary situation in which Keir Starmer is so in hock to China, for whatever reason, because he relies on it for economic growth, because of links or whatever, that he is prepared to, I'm afraid I have to say this, lie publicly, that he is prepared to sabotage a criminal trial and he is prepared to risk our country's security, because there doesn't seem to be much dispute that these men were spying. That's what the CPS is saying.
No. And these are, really must stress, these are allegations that they have denied.
The CPS say we were confident we could secure a prosecution on that element. The reason we couldn't is we don't think we can prove that they were doing it on behalf of an enemy.
The thing I find strange, I know the law has changed in terms of these designations or whether it has to be an enemy. I'm of the view, if anybody in this country is giving information to any government, whether there are Bezzy mates or not, that is...
Well, the spying kind of gives the game away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you're spying on us, you're probably not our mates.
Yeah. I mean, that's the clue, isn't it? I don't know why anyone thinks that China isn't a national threat and isn't an enemy, because we know this. We know that all they're doing. We also know how they aid and abet our enemies, like Russia, and Russia is absolutely our enemy, in a war that we are helping to fund on one side and they're helping to fund by buying the oil of Russia on the other side. I just find it absolutely extraordinary. There's even a question mark about this. I have no doubt at all that within the next 5 to 10 years, the West will be in conflict with China. Get ready, get prepared. And it does seem to me that an awful lot of our political class, and yes, I include an awful lot of the Tories in this as well, are totally in hock to China. There is so much money sloshing about. Like people say to me, oh, you speak up for Israel because you're paid, and some idiot NHS doctor, racist, and sue me, sweetheart, sue me, racist NHS doctor saying that I say what I say because I'm paid. Was apparently something like $7,000 a tweet. from Israel. I mean, wow.
Can you pay for lunch next time?
I was
please?
gonna say. I mean, seriously, rolling. I mean, I'm rolling in it, guys. I'm not just going on holiday. I'm buying the holiday island at this rate.
She's a bit tight, actually. There's no excuses now. There's no excuses now. I know this.
You cheeky sod. Anyway,
we only had Carver at the party last year.
Carver was not Carver at my party. Sod off. Anyway. Enough of this. He's not going to be invited back. But this is the thing. People make these allegations, but I can see no other explanation for like the handing over of Mauritius of Chagos Islands to Mauritius for no good reason at all, which helps China because Mauritius is in China's pocket. The decision on this, the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our US ambassador to US, despite all his very, very close financial links with China and commercial links. I'm sorry. It seems to me to be very, very, very clear indeed that a lot of our political classes are utterly beholden.
Yeah, and you've criticised the Prime Minister. Let me criticise a former Conservative Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who was Prime Minister, who was repeatedly very pro-China throughout his time in office, including on the Huawei issue and others. I mean, Boris Johnson's father, Stanley, was going, while Boris was in office, going to have repeated meetings in the Chinese embassy, and there is an extent to which foreign countries have all too often compromise the political classes of this country, and it is about time that we said no is enough. Enough is enough is enough. If you're a senior politician in this country, it is not acceptable for you to have close relations that have a whiff to them with the leaders or the leadership or officials from foreign states with whom this country does not share, at the very least, all of our values.
Yeah, I mean, it's very bizarre, isn't it? Talk about people sharing our values. What do you make of what these pro-Palestinian demonstrations on the anniversary of October the 7th? Yeah, I mean...
Scumbags, Julia.
I've been using a word beginning with C in my WhatsApps, but there we are. I can't say it on air. But, I mean, Jewish students being harassed and threatened, people standing around in balaclavas, dressed effectively as terrorists, shouting, globalise the Intifada, blatantly genocidal chats, glorifying the Hamas terrorists. We've got, can we put up the image of this Dr. Rame Aladwan? Can we put up the picture of the tweet? I think I asked for it a little bit earlier. Glorifying the terror attack on October the 7th. I mean, she literally puts up a picture. Have we got that yet? She literally puts up a picture. Obviously, we haven't got it yet. But she puts up a picture where of the terrorists breaking the fence from Gaza into Israel, to then murder 1,200 Israelis and others, to then rape women, kill children, burn families alive, and then take 251 hostages, and she's glorifying it. She's an NHS doctor. Not only do we pay her wages, she has been, the GMC, the General Medical Council, has looked into her before. But she tweeted when I responded saying this is blatant anti-Semitism. Every single thing in her tweets. She's a doctor at my local hospital. I was in there the other day with an elderly relative. What if we got treated by her? We're not Jewish, but I don't want someone who thinks that Jews deserve to be killed to be working in my local hospital, which is, by the way, in a very Jewish area. When I questioned her, I said, this is anti-Semitism, she replied, don't spend the £7,000 too quickly.
It is appalling racism that is displayed every day. And by the way, we just had a row a little bit earlier with somebody that says English identity isn't real. And they say exactly the same thing about Israeli identity and Jewish identity. Nobody counts unless you're the people they want to count. And it is the just accepted racism. And it is racism. Why do they only care about one country? Why do they only care about one set of alleged oppression of Muslims? They don't talk about Uyghurs. They don't talk about what's going on in Sudan. They don't talk about what's going on anywhere else around the world. This is widespread, socially acceptable, garden variety, anti-Semitism, racism that is displayed each and every day, not just on the streets of this country, in the hospitals, public services, on our national broadcaster. It's unacceptable. A Britain in which Jews are not safe is not Britain at all.
I know. And this thing, a lot of people say, well, it's not me, it's not a problem. And again, that old poem, first they came for the Jews, I was not Jewish. No, this is the thing. It's very, very clear in every country, in every civilization, that when the anti-Semitism reaches this sort of level, this is the beginning of the end. It's the big red neon flashing sign that there is a rot at the heart of your country, and you need to wake up. This is not just, I mean, it's absolutely primarily about Jewish people and feeling safe in this country. The idea that anyone in this country would say, do you know what, I think I'll go and live in a war-torn country that's facing rockets from 5 or 6 different countries, different terrorist forces, that are safer there than I'm on the streets of this country. That should be a wake-up call that something is going wrong. I want every single one of these people arrested. I mean, if you go to any sort of protest and you've got a mask on, for a start, I want you arrested. If you go to march and you are shouting, globalise the Intifada, you're glorifying terrorists, glorifying a prescribed terrorist group, I want you arrested. I want these people off the streets. Also, I want to know their names. I want a list of these people. The left always talks about consequences, don't they, for people who say things they don't like. Well, I want these people to have consequences. If you're a student and you attend one of these rallies and things, I absolutely want to know your name. I want to know your face. I want to make sure that you are known for this for your whole life. You don't get to escape this, because I genuinely think we need to start calling this out, and not just Keir Starmer going, oh, this is a bit terrible, and David Lammy getting booed at a vigil and, quote, as he told one of the organisers, taking one for the team. Oh, how good of you, David Lammy. This is something that is happening now on such a scale and with such impunity. And when an NHS doctor can carry on working despite posting the most blatantly, openly anti-Semitic, not anti-Israeli, not anti a foreign government. When you are glorifying the prescribed terrorist group that has massacred Jews and wants to annihilate the Jewish state and all Jewish people, you are an anti-Semite. If you don't like me saying that, feel free to sue me. I really don't care, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to win that one. We need to call these people out, and why these people are still employed. We're paying for them. We're paying for the woman who cut down the yellow ribbons for Israeli hostages the other day in Muswell Hill in North London. She's a taxpayer-funded student. We're paying for all these international students. I mean, the number of international students who you can hear when they speak that they're clearly not from here. Bye. Out the door. I will walk you in your little mask through the airport. Bye-bye. I don't want you here. What is controversial about that? Why is this not being done?
Yeah, and by the way, look, I work for the Free Speech Union. I defend probably more speech even than you would, Julia. But if you're going out and cutting down ribbons that people have put up as tributes, by the way, to hostages that are being starved to death in tunnels under Gaza by a terroristic organisation, you are committing criminal damage, you are committing a clear criminal offence, and yet when you report this to the police, when you say to the police, this is a crime, it's on video, here you can see it, what do you hear? Crickets. Absolutely nothing. Not interested, don't want to know, don't care. There is blatant, transparent, obvious two-tier justice going on, two-tier policing of what is occurring here. The police continually whinge they don't have the powers to deal with these people. That's why they're not doing it. They do have the powers. You can go and nicker, go do it tomorrow, and until you do so, I don't want to hear another single bleating, whining, moaning word from you, Sir Mark Rowley. You've got it on camera, get it done.
I know, it's just appalling, absolutely appalling. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we are talking about. I know a lot of you also want to get in touch about Robert Jenner, we were talking about in the last half hour. Sam Armstrong, bearing in mind, ran his campaign, Tory leadership last time round, definitely not on manoeuvres, 100%, absolutely not. But what he had to say in a leaked audio, but he said it at dinner, it wasn't a private conversation. He would have known this was public. Perfectly reasonable comments about Birmingham, particular part in Birmingham, which he just said, he just didn't see a single white face. Since when is it toxic to point out facts like that and to talk about just how we've seen such rapid change in our country, and to talk about ghettoisation and people living parallel lives after coming to this country? Shouldn't we be talking about that? 11:22 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. We'll get your calls up next. This is Talk.
reality is they need us more than we need them. We're still paying them large amounts of money under the original divorce agreement, so we could just stop paying those sums of money and so on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:26 is the time. Well, actually, I was quite wrong. Kemi Badenoch did turn up on time for her speech. It has started, the Tory leader, and we'll give you any of the updates on what she has to say as she says it. Let's go straight to your calls now. They're about all the big topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Kirsten is in London, and she joins us right now. Kirsten, good morning. What do you want to talk about?
Hi, good morning, Julia. It's about the conversation you had with James Mathewson.
These conversations with James Mathewson often end up, we get a lot of people on the phone lines. Is this in relation to Robert Jenrick's speech?
Yes. So I am a Hispanic.
Well, comments, yeah.
So legal immigrant.
Sorry, apologies. Where did you say you were from?
I am from Honduras.
From Honduras, yeah.
So I came here 10 years ago, and I am now a British citizen.
Lovely.
However, the first time I came to the UK, I pointed out to my mother that I didn't see English people because of what you said. Originally, or at some point, we all thought that the population was mostly white. My mother pointed out back then, 21 years ago, a lot of these people are also British, but not what we in Latin America think of them as British. White people with blue eyes, or so we thought. Anyway, I don't think that people should be offended by that. If you go to Latin America, you expect to see Latin Americans. You don't expect to see other ethnicities, or at least not the majority.
Is it a problem that you see black and brown faces on the streets of London where you live?
I think it's a problem, but we live very, very close to areas that are predominantly one ethnicity or two ethnicities. And actually, they were celebrating in Acton. We live close to Acton on 2 years ago on September 7th.
You saw people on the street celebrating. And is it one of those things where you kind of cross one road, you go into one high street, and then suddenly everyone appears to be of one particular ethnicity or faith group, and then you go to another area that's different?
You walk in some areas of London, and it seems like you're in the Middle East or in India or in Pakistan.
I mean, the thing is, saying that, honestly, the left would just go, oh, that's an outrageous thing to say, but they would be quite happy to comment on expat Brits, for instance, living in India or Nigeria or Saudi Arabia, who have their enclaves where it's entirely white, and they would comment on that, and they would comment on it disapprovingly.
In Latin America, it happens all the time with Americans because they stick to their little bubble and they don't try to learn Spanish or integrate.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right.
I completely agree with you on that. So as far as you're concerned, you don't think Jenrick said anything wrong? It was factual, and it's something. And again, everyone's saying, oh, it's about the colour of the skin. He categorically stated in the same conversation, without being prompted, this isn't about colour of skin.
Yeah. And as long as we all integrate, I don't see what the problem is.
Kirsten, appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Gertie. She's in Birmingham. Of course, Birmingham was the city he was talking about. Gertie, what do you make of what Robert Jenrick had to say?
Well, I agree with him. He's absolutely 100% correct, because I live in an area that's predominantly Asian, and it's quite a big area now. I live and work in it, and a lot of people will not integrate. Even the children themselves, they've never been outside of their area because they don't want their children to be influenced by other cultures.
Wow.
If
you say other cultures, are you including British culture, white tree? So, established historical white British culture, let's call it that as a simply because whites are the majority of this country and still are. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, I'm an Indian, but I've been born and bred in this country, and I'm proud to be British. But I'm actually now feeling quite sad to see the way this country is going.
I think I'm supposed to call you a racist or a bigot or I suppose, an angry middle-aged white man at this point if I was Gary Neville. Oh.
No, well, this is it, you see. He has no idea. He lives in his own bubble, to be honest. Yeah. And he's taken the same platform as Gary Lineker did. So, you know, the thing is, I just don't understand why all of a sudden it's all about just one group of people or one faith, when we should all be living together in harmony as we did back in the 60s, 70s and 80s.
Well, and again, a lot of people who, I mean, certainly, you know, the Windrush generation, they would say absolutely didn't feel like it was in harmony when they suffered racism when they arrived on our shores. I mean, I must say that. But as far as you're concerned, your family, presumably your parents came from India or your grandparents. You were born here. You're British.
Yes.
Full stop. You're British.
Yes, I am. Yes.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Why do you think people come here and then don't want to live, you know, in Britain? I can understand. I mean, I don't approve, but I understand, you know, a British person going to Spain. Basically, they're there for the weather. They're there for the weather and the beach. But they're not necessarily. Some people might not integrate and might not learn the language, etc., etc. But no one's coming to Britain for the weather. So
no, they're coming to Britain for the benefits system, to be honest. In the last 40 years, it's been more so for the benefits. It's been so easy for people to get benefits. Where I work, and I'm going to tell you this, these are students who have not been in this country for that long, and they are getting 3 times more than what I'm getting in my wages, which is sickening.
Wow.
But they will not work. They refuse to work. They refuse to speak English. They refuse to integrate. Everything we do at my workplace, it has to conform to their culture. Every other cultures are being left out.
That's very interesting. I know you're being quite guarded in what you say, and I sense that. Gertie, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, just a brief response to that. Look, I mean, you know, there's a British woman of Indian heritage living in Birmingham saying, yeah, he's right.
And someone from Honduras just before that. Never believe these people that go on the media and carp on and say everyone of colour is offended about these comments. How would that feel for everybody of colour that's listening? They all feel so. No. Do you know what, actually? People of different, whatever racial background, whatever religious background in this country, they do not all think as one.
I know this thing, the community.
People are entitled to have varied views. And do you know what? They actually have enough common sense to know that, like, an observation is just an observation, and, like, to take the rough with the smooth and just have a mature and a nuanced view of things. I'm fed up with people pretending that British people from ethnic minority backgrounds are all stupid and all think the same things. Because, by the way, the liberals that go on the television, the progressive types, actually it's them that's being racist by presenting British minority people as having stupid views that are all the same as one another. Yeah. So they're the problem, not just us.
Absolutely. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Sam Armstrong, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. Just let you know, Kemi Badenoch has been speaking her big keynote speech. She says Britain is stagnating while the world moves on. Said young people in the UK feel they're living somewhere where things never get any better. She says we're competing with economic success stories like Poland. She also said Britain has taken its living standards for granted for too long. She also says that Britain's sense of identity is being eroded, and talking about the impact of mass migration, she said we have all felt it, and underneath this society which is struggling to cope with the reality of getting poorer, struggling to cope with the sense of erosion of who we are as a country. Being timid will get us nowhere, she says. We'll talk more about that coming up. 11:34 is the time. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:37 is the time. We are going to be getting you updates on what Kemi Badenoch has to say. Latest comments about Keir Starmer and her big keynote speech to party conference. Keir Starmer is utterly useless and weak. Tell us something we don't know, love. But there we are. Let's turn our attention right now to what's been happening on our streets, in our universities, on our TV screens, on our social media over the last, well, few days, but particularly yesterday on the anniversary of the October the 7th massacre. Nicole Lampert is a journalist and campaigner with the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism and joins us now. Good morning to you, Nicole.
Hi, thank you for having me on today,
Thank
Julia.
you so much. And I follow your Twitter feed, it is absolutely extraordinary what we have seen on social media, what we've seen on our streets, on university campuses and the like. Just run us through some of the things that people thought it was appropriate to do on the anniversary of the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Well, at almost every university, we've had people outside screaming, celebrating, calling for more intifada. It should be said that, you know, these claim to be pro-Palestinian people, but they're quite the opposite, because if they were pro-Palestinians, they would be calling for peace. You don't hear any call for peace. You hear for calls for intifada, revolution, more war. We've had that outside universities. We've had that in the streets of London. We've had it almost non-stop, haven't we, for the last 2 years. We saw it in particular after the murders in Manchester. And of course, on October 7, the anniversary of the massacre in Israel, we've seen this particular joy in it. And that's all I can really describe as, in that they are happy about it. They are happy about what happened. And they'll either deny what happened, or they'll say Israel did it to themselves.
Yeah.
And this is a way of trying to take over our pain, pretend it didn't happen. Yeah. And claim that there's no reason for this war, and we've seen, even, you know, with some media organisations almost trying to forget about what happened. With the BBC, they put out a statement about the coverage of the war, and talked about not an invasion but an escalation.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is extraordinary that it's happening, and I see it whenever I post stuff online now. I get, I'm a Gaza, genocide baby killer. I'm taking £7,000 for every posting. I mean, you and I are making an absolute fortune if that's the case, are we not, Nicole? Yeah, exactly. If only. But also, again, deny that it happened. Or, well, they deliberately they wanted it to happen, and everybody at Nova Festival was actually killed by Israeli forces. I mean, all of this stuff is provably untrue. All of it is provably. The evidence is there. We know what happened on the day because Hamas sodding filmed it and put it on social media themselves. They weren't ashamed of it. At least the Nazis had the decency to be ashamed and trying to do it behind closed doors when they were killing Jews. This lot, they're literally like proud as punch about it. And even people like, I mean, not just, I can sort of almost write off idiot students. You think the world's about to die because of climate change, and that Jews are the cause of every problem. I mean, these are evil, awful people. If they're foreign students, I want them out tomorrow. If they're British students, I want them re-educated. I'll bring them in the studio and explain to them some facts. But when you get a doctor, we've got an NHS doctor, Dr. Rama Aladwan. She works at the Royal Free Hospital. It's a Jewish area. It's in Hampstead. Okay? It's a very famous hospital. I was there the other week with an elderly relative. The idea that I would be treated by this woman, or any of my Jewish friends would be treated by this woman, is absolutely appalling. She tweeted yesterday, "Glory to the breaking of the 17-year-long illegal siege." Glory to the Palestinian resistance. Glory to our martyrs. And the Al-Aqsa flood, Palestine, Gaza, and then a heart. And with the picture, we've got it up there, with the picture of one of the diggers that broke through the fence between Gaza and Palestine to allow murderous, raping, hostage-taking terrorists through to slaughter innocent people. She's still employed by the NHS. She's allowed to treat patients paid for by the taxpayer. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, she's not working at the Royal Free anymore, so she.
Well, thank God for that.
I'm not sure where she's working, but a few weeks ago, the GMC, they did attempt to have her license suspended, and she was put before a medical tribunal, and the medical tribunal, and this obviously what she said yesterday is something else, but she's been saying this sort of stuff for months. They said that this was down to her free speech. So that is the extent, and it did lead to Wes Streeting a couple of weeks ago saying there's a problem within the NHS. But
yeah, well then sort it out.
Yeah, he's the guy in charge. But actually, this week I've been investigating some of the root causes of this sort of language and what's happening. I wrote a piece in the Telegraph. I'm going to do a kind of version on my Substack, and it's about what we're seeing in our society and how anti-Semitism drives societies crazy. Yeah. And this is a kind of Soviet ideology, and that's what we're seeing on our streets. So Zionism is therefore, everything that's bad in the world is Zionism. Zionism is apartheid, it's genocide, all of these things that we know anyone can look at and see is not true. Yeah. And so this isn't just about Jews, this is about destabilising our society.
And I think a lot of people don't get that. I say this is a rot at the heart of Western societies, Western civilization and our liberal democratic values. But also, again, people not realising how much this is being pushed by, the Russian bots, by the Chinese bots, by the Iranian bots. This is a multi-million pound operation. We're told, oh no, the Israelis are paying all these influences. If Israel, which is a pretty functioning state and certainly has a very, very well-functioning military and spy network, if they were paying people to do their PR for them internationally, they'd have been doing a better job of it. In the same way that if they wanted to impose a genocide on people in Gaza, they'd have managed to do it in the last 2 years. I mean, this is the thing.
That's the most obvious thing, isn't
Uniquely incompetent in these two areas.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. If they wanted to commit a genocide, then why aren't they? Even the most obvious, it's just the most obvious thing, isn't it? And it's very tragic that thousands of people have been killed in this war. But a genocide is something completely different. If Israel wanted to commit a genocide, it would have done it on October 8th. There would be no Palestinians left in Gaza because it has the military capability to do that. But still, these lies, they're pushed. And the interesting thing is that they're pushed via Hamas to the UN and then repeated on the BBC and all these channels, and then it's repeated and repeated and repeated, and people say, oh, but the UN said it.
And the BBC said it. But again, even like words like just genocide, the British government formally, put out an official document. They'd assessed whether there was genocide. They decided there was not genocide because there isn't. There clearly isn't, and every single fact would tell you there isn't genocide being committed by Israel in Gaza. But you can't get a cabinet minister to say that, because they know they've got a vote here. I mean, it's a numbers game. I wrote this in The Sun last week. It's a numbers game. 4 million Muslims in this country, large number of whom feel very strongly about the Gaza issue. We saw that with the election last year, 5 Gaza MPs, and then you've got, 300,000 plus Jews in this country, or less than that. There you go. There's your numbers. It's as simple as that. This is a numbers game as opposed to being on the side of right or wrong. But can I come back to just universities? Because I am so horrified by what's happening at universities. And I know 18-year-olds, Jewish girls, who've basically been talked out of going to certain universities because they know they won't feel safe there, even though of course they want to study at a good university, but they cannot be guaranteed, particularly London campuses, they cannot be guaranteed to be safe. The intimidation is so strong. That is so beyond unacceptable to me in this country, in this day and age. What can universities do about it? Or are the university authorities part of the problem?
They're massively part of the problem. I've been speaking to a group of academics, in particular in Edinburgh, who are absolutely despairing that even just on university property, there are signs calling for revolution, intifada, and they've tried to take it down, and the university authorities completely deny it.
Yeah, and intifada means the mass killing of Jews. That's what it means.
Exactly. So there are some universities that are handling it better, and I have to say, so Leeds, where my son is, and where I went, they were pretty awful for about 18 months that students took over entire buildings. Yesterday what happened was, although you had students outside the building, they were kettled by the police and weren't allowed to kind of cause terror amongst the many students. But you're absolutely right that there have always been universities that Jews will tend to go towards. because they're regarded as safer. Even when I was at university, this was the case.
But that's
the Jewish Society. And this is kind of what I'm saying, that this is although we're seeing like the height of the problem now, what we're seeing is 30, 40 years of work that has been going on. So when I was at university, and you probably, Julia, there were people that were starting this, that were going on about Israel being an apartheid.
No, genuinely, never saw any of it. Never saw. I mean, I'm probably older than you, to be fair. This has happened since then. Nicole, I'm going to have to leave you there. You keep up with the fantastic work. Do have a look at her Substack and that Telegraph article. Journalist campaigner with the campaign against anti-Semitism, Nicole Lampert. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to get you some updates on what Kemi Badenoch's had to say. She's pledging radical reform of the welfare state, British benefits for British citizens only, benefits to be restricted to the most severe conditions only. Well, there's an idea. They should have thought that when they were in power. Motability vehicles restricted to people with serious disabilities. So Teddy's elbow, a bit of anxiety on a Monday morning, not going to cut it anymore. She's promised to scrap Labour's taxes on VAT on private school fees, family farms, family businesses. She's going to reverse measures in Angela Rayner's employment bill. Of course, that's a crucial bill which basically gives you rights from day one. But I mean, not very good for employers who just aren't entirely quite sure whether they really are going to need an employee. She's also mocked the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who's taking part in anti-Israel boycotts in the past, basically saying not really very convinced by what she has to say right now. And she's accused Sir Keir Starmer of deliberately collapsing the China spy trial because he wanted to suck up to China. It's a very strong allegation. We are going to be talking more about all of that. Also up next, going to be talking about slavery reparations. Oh yes, Sir Lenny Henry is getting his tuppence worth in today. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
He should be really ashamed of himself, and I think he probably regrets, the way he has behaved. Do you not think he does?
I don't think. I think the only thing he'll be worried about is friendship with Beckham is going to get a knighthood, isn't he? And at the end of the day, yeah, but Beckham has spent years trying to get a knighthood. And I'm completely. Yeah. He is symptomatic, is he not, of a large number of those sorts of celebrities who have made 70, 100 million quid and now talk down to us. I mean, he was Starmer's attack dog. I reckon he wanted to be mayor of Manchester.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:52 is the time. I can't wait to get a reaction from Sam Armstrong when it comes to what Kemi Badenoch has had to say. Banning doctors from going on strike is another one of her announcements. She is making a heck of a lot of announcements for a leader who said we're going to take a couple of years to have a policy. She's obviously realised you're going to need some policies if you're going to take on reform. There's no doubt about that. We're going to talk about all of that after midday. Also going to talk to Sir Ian Douglas-Smith, who's watching the speech, make out what he thinks of it, especially with that poll that's pushing the Conservatives into fourth place in terms of the number of MPs they would have. A More in Common poll, which puts reform now on 31%. But let's talk right now about something completely different, but something I'm utterly mad. So Lenny Henry, who used to be a funny comedian, there was a time, he's got very political lately, and he says that all black British people should be paid slavery reparations. Yes, really. Not just backing the Caribbean nations for their absolute grift, asking for 18 trillion pounds worth of reparations from Britain, but also for money to be given to individual black Britons. Well, let's talk about this with historian and author Martin Whittock. Good morning to you, Martin.
Good morning.
I mean, here we go again. I kind of thought, though, there's more important things to talk about today, but this really does matter. It is utterly ridiculous. I can imagine a scenario then, if this were the case, we would have a situation where, extraordinarily, someone who was maybe, I don't know, working as a cleaner, working as a hospital porter, working in a low-paid job, who was black and British, paying taxes that would go towards reparations to, I don't know, Kemi Badenoch, who the Jack Tory leader of the Conservative Party, because black people would be entitled in Britain to reparations, but the taxes that would pay for it would be paid for also by the black people living here. On what possible basis is there an argument for people living in this country, by the way, all of whom came here through choice, not through dragged here by slavery, to be given reparations for slavery?
I think it's a non-starter. Not all people of African descent in the UK, anyway, are from communities equally impacted by historic slavery. Exactly. We know some, a minority, but some West African communities actually cooperated with slavery. And whilst the UK clearly was responsible for much wrong, we can't ignore the terrible things done by slavery. It then, after 1807, took costly action against the slave trade. And since then, large amounts of foreign aid have been paid by the UK, and rightly so, I would say. So my basic position is it's not possible to hold present generations responsible for past wrongs. And I've changed my views on this, I hasten to add. And the right way forward now is for the UK to play its part in international efforts to support developments in the global south and efforts to combat poverty and disadvantages in this country, with targeted assistance and educational initiatives, not handing out sums of cash to individuals. It's the kind of thing that grabs a headline, but it doesn't actually address significant issues of poverty or disadvantage.
No, but also, can we just explain the fact? I mean, slavery was awful. Every single empire has carried out slavery. If we're going to pay reparations for the Atlantic slave trade, I want reparations paid to my country from the Danes for the Vikings and from the Italians for the Romans. Simple as that. If there is no time limit on this, then we'll have that money as well, please. But also, crucially, we would like to be compensated, or pass compensation on from, as you say, those West African nations where it was official policy to round up fellow Africans and sell them to the slave traders. I mean, the idea is just so preposterous. And also the idea that the Caribbean nations, the reason why many Caribbean nations are poor is not because of a history of slavery. The reason why many Caribbean nations are poor because they've got kleptocratic, completely and utterly corrupt, incompetent governments. And I'm not entirely sure why any of my taxes should pay for any of that.
I mean, clearly, this kind of statement grabs headlines, but it doesn't deal with the difficulties and the realities of global inequalities and disadvantage and so on. And what we need is a grown-up conversation amongst countries to say, what can we do to help each other? What can we do to improve governance? What can we do to improve the terms of trade? But simply handing out sums of cash to people grabs a headline, but it does not engage with the seriousness of the issue, which is how do we deal with the problems of the world in which we now live, which we can't ignore and have to engage with. But we have to do it in a more grown-up way than in a way that, although well-meaning, just grabs headlines but doesn't actually tackle the real issues of what it means to be in 2025 in a complex and
there's a
world.
very strong argument that, OK, anyone who came to Britain who doesn't come originally from a slave, slave-owning, part of the world. So if you come from West Africa, well, then, of course, originally you're not eligible. But even so, you could argue very strongly that given the state of what's happened in many West African countries over the last couple of centuries, that the people who are the many, many, many generations descendants, they are in a better place, whether in the Caribbean or in Britain right now, than they would have been if they stayed in West Africa. What happened to their ancestors was appalling and disgusting and a crime against humanity, as it was when it happened under every other country and every other empire and every other civilization which has also taken slaves. But the idea that someone whose great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was taken by the Atlantic slave trader and sold by a West African country to white slave traders and taken to the Caribbean or America, the idea that person right now deserves compensation, that's a nonsense.
And it doesn't deal with the complexities of life now, quite apart from the fact it's unaffordable given the pressures on the economy and so on. We just need a more grown-up conversation amongst countries about what maybe
Caribbean nations need to have a grown-up conversation among themselves about why they are, with beautiful islands, fantastic tourist destinations, why they are doing so badly.
And because issues of governance, issues about how countries are run, they are also very much in the mix. And very often people are willing to talk about that, for example, aspects of corruption and so on and so forth. These things do have to be, civic values and so on. These things also have to be addressed in order to raise people from poverty and from situations of...
Well, working hard, trade and good governance and law and order tend to be the things that live. And if those countries delivered that, they might find that would work. Martin Whitto, historian and author, thank you very much indeed for that. Very quick word from Sam Armstrong, sitting here very patiently.
The only thing unique about Britain's history on slavery is that we ended it. Every country, everywhere on earth did it until we came along and we stopped it. That's it. It is just not even... the fact that someone like a multimillionaire Lenny Henry talking about this abject... The idea that I would have to contribute to taxes to pay to give money to him. What an absolute load of nonsense. Up next, going to take a break, going to talk about Kemi Badenoch's big speech to conference. Will it save her career? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Thank you so much for your company. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Thank you also for a lot of your calls. Don't forget to get in touch. If you want to have your say on any of the big topics we're talking about, give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Interestingly, Kemi Badenoch is still on her feet. She's been giving speech for the last 45 minutes, big keynote speech to Tory party conference, and there's been a lot of announcements. I have to say, a huge number of announcements. This is coming at a time when she's only been leader since the autumn, around this time last year, and many are talking about how she won't survive the next local elections and elections in Scotland and in Wales in next May. Slump in the polls, latest More in Common poll, a massive big poll of 20,000 Britons looking at the Conservatives being basically down to 4th place after the next election, if it was big proviso, if it was voted on now, with only 41 MPs. Reform projected to get a 96-seat majority. Reform on 31%, Labour 20%, Tories on just 19%. 4 in 10 Tory voters back in that big vote back in 2019 say they would now vote Reform. Just a third of those voters for Boris Johnson say they would vote Tory. What does she have to do to bring it back? Well, a lot of people are saying she needs to do some leading. She needs to actually announce some policies. Well, wow, she has been doing that in the last few minutes. She has announced that her next Conservative government will triple stop and search. She's announced that rip-off pointless Mickey Mouse university courses will be shut down, and the money saved will be used to double apprenticeship. She's talked about a commitment to abolish business rates for hundreds of thousands of businesses, particularly those hospitality and shops on our high streets. That was announced by Samel Stride. She's going to reverse net zero. That is a long-awaited policy I fully support. She is also talking about how she's absolutely says she will be leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. She said it's not a plan, so it's a plan, not a slogan. She says that basically we're going to deal with people getting their benefits for just, 5,000 new people a day, every single day signing on to get disability benefits, that is going to have to end. Motability cars only available to those with the most serious disabilities. She's going to end political correctness in the police, cut the civil service back by 1/3 down to its 2016 level. She says we don't just believe in reducing the size of the state. I've always said that while government should do less, what it should do well. She said that tens of thousands of hours of police time were being wasted on social media posts, investigations. That is going to end. She has also talked about various different other taxes, talking about drilling our oil and gas now as well. There is an awful lot being announced by her, ending some of these key, very unpopular taxes, family farms, family businesses, promising to scrap taxes, the VAT on private school fees. That's a big one for the Tories, I think we can safely say. Lots of expectation that there may be more going forward. She has also talked about British benefits for British citizens only, benefits being restricted, I say, to the most severe conditions. Lots of expectation. She could announce an end to inheritance tax. We haven't got that yet, but she has just announced she will abolish stamp duty. Now, that may well be the big announcement. Now, that, I have to say, that would be a big win for a lot of people and would absolutely be a game changer for the housing market. Let's talk about this now with my guest joining me throughout the show, Sam Armstrong, Conservative commentator. That stamp duty announcement, hugely popular, and not just with Tory voters. That is a big sort of big clarion call to young people desperate to get on the housing ladder, because it's such a huge sum of money. I mean, as you move along up the housing ladder.
Yeah, definitely a pitch to young people. It's a big tax cut. We don't have the exact figures.
No, it doesn't make that much money. It stymies the property market, but it only makes a couple of billion.
It is definitely a pitch towards younger people. It's definitely something that I think will be popular with economists. It's the kind of tax cut that will get the economy growing. It's a tax cut targeted at doing just that. It is not perhaps as politically explosive as cutting inheritance tax, which is the kind of thing that Conservatives have made waves on in the past. I think it is in some ways a continuation of what Kemi Badenoch has been trying to do, which is to set out what she describes as a serious plan for the economy, in which she identifies the savings first, comes up with a plan, and does show that she is a more serious voice on the economy.
And there is a key thing on the economy, because actually a lot of reform stuff, although getting rid of net zero things does free up a huge amount of money, and the benefits and the immigration issue, again, there'll be costs up front, which will save money long run. But there are also some very big sort of spending commitments, and there's a lot of criticism of reform that actually, and it's one of my criticisms, that actually, you know, lots of ways they're a right-wing party on social issues, but they're quite a left-wing party on economic issues. She's obviously thought she spotted a gap in the market there for a sort of fiscally sensible government. I mean, she talked earlier, we knew earlier, it was in the papers, that she was talking about a sort of golden rule, so dealing with the black hole, so big spending cuts. Everyone's got to make spending. It's not possible. We can't borrow anymore. We can't afford it. We're spending a fortune on our interest only. But also some of that money going to pay off the debt, to cut those future interest payments, but other half of it to go to boost growth. And part of that will be tax cuts to kickstart the economy, because raising taxes, funnily enough, doesn't boost growth.
No, and there is a very, very different alternate vision, which we're about to see not just as a vision, but as the reality for our country. Rachel Reeves is about to set it out in the coming days. And the Rachel Reeves plan is to continue spending money hand over fist to people that everybody knows are swinging the lead to take as much welfare as possible. And I get why people do it. I get why people want to do it. I get why people are angry
but we shouldn't be allowed
everything
to do
else. But we are in a situation in which our economy is going down the Swanee, and unless we do something very, very quickly, we are all going to be poorer.
There are no taxes that you could raise that would, other than putting a massive percentage on people's basic rate of income tax, thinking everybody, and I mean, God, they'll never be voted in again if they do that, and they don't want to do that. They'll do anything to avoid that, even though they'll break their pledges. You know, I mean, in every time our prices go up and the like, and adding things on VAT and so, that is also hitting people in the pocket. But they won't want to break that key manifesto pledge. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to make cuts, because the only way of balancing the books ever, or coming close to it, is to cut spending. But Labour just don't want to do it. Now, what is really interesting, if you look back at Labour Party conference, for a start, the whole thing was about reform. I mean, Kemi Badenoch didn't get a mention. Virtually Keir Starmer's entire keynote speech at the end of the conference was all about reform and all about Nigel Farage. And I said at the time, and I said to people at Reform at the time, Reform are going to go up 3 points and Labour are going to go down, which is what has happened, because they've boosted them. Now, there may be a Labour idea that we ignore the Tories because we don't think reform is such a threat, because they'll grow brightly and then they'll explode before the next election, and then the Tories are destroyed and so reform. That's obviously the punt, and people will go, well, I like Nigel Farage, but do I really trust him with this? Kemi Badenoch has been squeezed between the two. The Tory party was squeezed between the two. We saw, 20 Tory councillors go over to Reform. What was announced yesterday, they kept them back to announce it. These are sort of damaging stories in the day. Lots of talk about even her own shadow cabinet talking about ousting her, getting together those votes of no confidence, those letters to the 1922 committee to oust her before May's local election, and a near certain wipeout of Tories. But has she done enough here? She'd said when she became leader there would be 2 years of thinking and research before there was an announcement of policy. Meanwhile, Reform, throwing these out all the way. She's had to come up with policies. This is, by the looks of it, quite a barnstorming speech, talking passionately. She's got some actual policy announcements. Scrapping stamp duty is a huge one.
It's definitely a change of tack. There's more red meat in here than you could hope for at an all-you-can-eat steak restaurant, and I've got no doubt that they will love it in the room. We do now have the figures. Stamp duty cut is likely to be somewhere in the realm of 11.6 billion. That's how much it raised last year. So
I'm surprised it's so much.
It's a pretty hefty tax cut, and it will restrict the Conservatives' capacity to make further cuts. Labour, it's worth just jumping ahead to what they were going to say, are of course going to point out that it will save billionaires buying mansions lots of money. That is what they will say. They'll say it doesn't apply to properties under 300,000 as it is, and only on sums above that. Beyond
300,000 doesn't buy you much in large parts of this country.
I don't think there is any doubt that this is a good speech from Kemi Badenoch, and she's obviously very good at it. It's one of her great strengths. The judging will ultimately, the proof will be in the pudding of the polls, and that is
whether it's enough, whether it's relevant enough.
Well,
this is it. I mean, first-time buyers aren't unaffected, but the key thing is people go, "Oh, well, I don't want somebody who's very rich to not have to pay the stamp duty." But the reality is. The reality is you need those people to be moving and buying. Every time someone buys a new home...
So good for the economy.
They spend money. They have builders, they have painters, they have decorators. Oh, yeah, and the lawyers and all of that. They spend money. And lots of ordinary people who aren't billionaires get that money. They get that money into their businesses.
And actually it keeps house prices down because what you do is you incentivise older people that want to downsize, for example, to do it.
If you've got a decent home as a family home in London, especially in South East where prices are mad, just to downsize, to buy the next property costs you up to like £100,000 that you're just giving away. You're just giving away to the government. Now, I'm sorry, stamp duty is a disastrous policy, which I think you'll be able to bring in more taxes. As a result of dropping that policy. I'm surprised it's raised 11.2 billion, 7.6 billion in total. But again, the impact on the market is so huge. My family, everyone I know where we live, I mean, everyone just does basements because it doesn't matter what the basement costs, it's less than the cost of the stamp duty to move.
Because frankly, as much as everyone, and I'm sorry, I know a number of them listen to us, as much as everyone hates paying money to builders who take forever and make a big mess and, are very inconvenient, everyone hates giving it over to the taxman even more.
Absolutely. Well, look, we're going to be talking to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, who's former Tory party leader. He's going to be on the line in a few moments. Let's get to your calls on this first. 0344 499 1000. Paula is on the line. She's called that number. Paula, what do you make of that big announcement from Kemi Badenoch?
Oh, I wish they would get rid of stamp duty because it also affects old people. I would love to downsize at the minute.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that the tax that you have to pay, and I'm frightened that they're going to put it on sales in November, because then that will mean we will never be able to move anywhere. But I'm finding that it's just too much to spend out when you've got no further income coming in. You've just got your state pension.
Yep.
I'm also finding that when you do find something that you can afford to pay for, you can't afford to live in it because the council tax is too high.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. People are just sort of caught in this bind. But we desperately need people. I mean, I think my parentals, I've got a lot of them, lots of marriages. Everybody has downsized. Everyone has moved from a family house to a flat because they don't need, or a very small house, because they don't need that space. Freeing up those homes for families who do need that space, and of course they can do it, but they're paying stamp duty to do. We're actually encouraging people not to move to a home that's appropriate to their size. But also, I think particularly young families, right, you're going to have to buy, if you want to have 2 kids, you're going to have to buy a 3-bedroom home and save up for even more years. And meanwhile, the market goes crazy, not this year, but most years. But because you can't afford to move twice, because the stamp duty to move the second time will be too expensive. And it massively impacts people's ability to make choices for the here and now.
Yes, it's just ridiculous, it is. But I've got another point.
Yeah.
When I come to vote next time, I really want to vote reform, and I told my MP this last time. But
is your MP a Tory?
Yes, he is, and he's perfectly fine. He's perfectly okay.
He's forgiven you.
But I've spoken to him. I've told him this. I said I wanted to vote reform, but for some reason we usually have Liberals second here. But for some reason,
where are you, by the way? I don't know where you are.
I'm South Hereford.
Oh, Hereford, yep.
North Hereford ended up with a ruddy green woman.
Oh, good Lord.
Anyway,
our hearts go out to them.
I know, it's dreadful. But I was going to vote reform last time.
Yeah.
But when I saw Labour chasing so hard, I thought, no, I've got to vote anti-Labour, and I will do the same again, in the hopes that reform get in, but the Tories are then such a good backup to them, and they hold their feet to the fire, that then the Tories can actually have some resurrection
That's an interesting thought, Paula. Very interesting. I tell you what, I wish most of the political strategists in this country thought so wisely. Paula, thank you so much. Appreciate that. John is on the line. He's in Bradford. John, I know you also want to talk about Robert Jenrick's speech, but just what we've just been talking about with Kemi Badenoch and her big speeches, what did you make of that?
Well, she's stolen the clause from reform,
which is unusual because it's the other way around normally.
Yeah. But I think they're all reform policies. Most of them are.
I don't think the Reform have got policy on stamp duty. That is an original. They must be looking around. Is there a policy on anything, please? That hasn't been used up already. But you think you think that basically she like the sort of half cut Labour policies. She's just sort of trailing along behind reform.
Yes, I do, definitely.
That's interesting. That's really. Now, you also wanted to talk about Robert Jenrick and those comments that were the gotcha in The Guardian yesterday that he's been criticised for, about his comments about not seeing white faces, lack of integration in a Birmingham ward.
Right. Well, let's look at the situation. There's certain people coming to this country. They do not want to accept their way of life. They want us to accept their way of life. Mm-hmm. Which obviously causes problems. And as far as I'm concerned, we're not encouraging people to learn English because you go to the hospital, you can have a translator, you go and when they give you information, it's in God knows how many languages. If you just say, right, like they do on the continent, if you come to the hospital, if you come to use a government service, number one, you speak English, and number two, we won't print it in any other languages.
Yeah, bring a friend. Bring a friend, not a problem.
And they can do the translation for you. Because, we're just not encouraging people to learn English.
I don't think it's a question of encouraging. I think it should be a requirement.
Yeah,
Unless you're a tourist. I don't learn the foreign language of every country I visit, but I make sure I learn, please and thank you and good morning and goodbye. I mean, I learn some basics as a common courtesy.
Yeah, when I used the service in Spain, I don't speak a lot of Spanish, but I spoke enough to, for them to understand, and that's what you should do. Can I make one more? Please do, point? Yeah. It's about all these anti-Jewish things that are taking place. Yeah. I think what these people do, they should be arrested, they should be put in a room, and they must be made to watch that film right to the very end. And then
of the atrocities on October the 7th. I think they still wouldn't accept it. They so it's not as bad as what's happening in Gaza. I mean, that's what they'd say.
Well, I mean, the other thing is they've decided in Bradford, I think it's the 29th of November, they're going to fly the Palestinian flag over the town hall. I think that's absolutely appalling. And I've written to them. I said, well, are you going to fly the Israeli flag as well? No comment.
Yeah, exactly. John, thank you so much for your call. Very much appreciate that. Going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be hearing from Sir Ian Dougsmith, former Conservative Party leader, about his big announcements from Kemi Badenoch at party conference. She said she wasn't going to have any policies for a couple of years. She's been throwing them out today, including, crucially, abolishing stamp duty. But given where the Tories are in the polls, do any policy announcements from them even matter? That's up next. This is Talk.
he should be really ashamed of himself, and I think he probably regrets, you know, the way he is behaved. Do you not think he just regrets?
And even when you say to these people, but, you know, Farage heads a party that's got no political experience, no experience of government, a lot of people just look at it and go, yeah, and could it be any damn worse than it has been for the last few years? And that's why I think right now, and it might not be in 3 years and 9 months, that's why I think the Reform are leading the chase, because people are sick to death of what they see as lies, people not keeping their promises, and they're like, do you know what, why don't we just try that? Where can we possibly go wrong, you know?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:23 is the time. Well, certainly a spring in the step of a lot of Tories as they race for their trains home from Manchester after listening to Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader's keynote speech. A lot of pressure on her, big question marks about her leadership, not just among party members who are deserting her for reform, along with 20 Tory councillors yesterday alone, but also from her own shadow cabinet. But has she done and said enough today in a, well, pretty solid speech with lots and lots of policy announcements, including abolishing stamp duty for everybody? Will that be enough to woo back those Tory voters who say, nah, we're off to reform? Well, let's talk about this with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, former Tory leader and still a Conservative MP, of course. Good afternoon to you, Sir Ian. What did you make of her speech?
Well, I thought it answered two really important questions, which you had to do today, I think. The first was that she was able to show that she has passion and that she understands how to deliver and has a key idea, you know, good intellect, able to do that. And the second thing was, I thought in her performance, suddenly we saw into her character for the first time, which I think people know who Starmer is, they know who Farage is.
Do they? I have no idea who Keir Starmer is.
Well, you know what I mean. They know that he doesn't know himself, but the reality is you kind of know what you're dealing with Farage the same. I think with her there's been the concern that we don't know really who she is. And I thought the speech today, a part of it was really important for her to show her character, and I thought her humour in there was really important, the occasional laugh, which probably wasn't even scripted, and the sense, really, of her link, really, with the audience. And I thought that was really important. So their performance as much as they are policy, these speeches.
Yeah, and a lot of these things do matter, and crucial policy announcements. Yeah. I would actually disagree with you. I've always felt, but then maybe, you know, being, you know, political journalist, I've always felt I know the cut of her jib, I know her character, and I trusted her. She's spoken out on key issues about women's rights versus trans rights and some key issues that I really care about, and has basically, I don't, you know, and about, you know, cultural issues and, you know, multiculturalism and British nationalism, and she's been totally and utterly refusing to be cowed and sort of, you know, worried about speaking out. And I've always liked that about her, but what she's been lacking is a plan, a policy, and every time we've seen a policy announcement, certainly ahead of this party conference, it's been sort of a, you know, some of the reforms announced 6 months ago, and there was this fear that she was going to do this full 2 years of a little bit of contemplating, talk to a think tank, and then maybe come up with some ideas. That's been put paid to by the fact that Reform has just leapt ahead in the polls, continues to keep that poll lead, and the latest More in Common poll basically suggesting they could have a majority of over 90 if there were an election tomorrow. Now, lots of these people voting for them would be Tory voters. What we had today was some, and this week generally, was some actual meat on the bones of some policy. In particular, this big final announcement, abolishing stamp duty on homes. How important, how significant were those announcements, and particularly that one, in terms of, I suppose, shoring up support for her and the party, but also perhaps bringing back some of those Reform voters?
I think it's all very important. The reason I said they don't really know who she is, you and journalists have a sense of that, but the public doesn't. And I thought today it was important for her to show that she is somebody who is more in tune with them than anybody else. The second bit in the answer to your question is I think these policy statements, I think, are solid. I mean, a lot of work at the Centre for Social Justice on the welfare changes, and all of those figures are, I promise you, absolutely right. Why? Because we did them first and they've taken them. Yeah. And I know that to be a fact. They've been checked and everything else.
And you were, as former Work and Pensions Secretary of the Tories, and you brought in a lot of the changes. And you actually I don't think you ever get the credit for how you were very successful at actually improving our welfare system and making it more streamlined, but also
we had the lowest number of workless households since records began.
And now
1,600 people a day were going back into work.
And it's kind of the opposite right now. We've got 5,000 people a day under Labour signing on to disability benefits. She said she would tackle that, and the mobility cars and all of that. That is a key issue for the majority of voters. Want benefit cuts, don't they?
Of course it is, because it's just doesn't work. This all came out the back of COVID and everything else, but it just doesn't work if somebody looks around and says, do you know what? I'm probably better off if I don't do anything at all. Now, once that starts at an early age, you never get it back. And the most important point that I make, and I think they've made it today, is there is nothing greater in your life than that first paycheck, which tells you you did that. And now what you buy, what you do, where you go, comes down to your hard work. And I think that's the bit we often forget about. The moral purpose of work is critical. Without it, we sit on the couch and dwindle away.
Yeah, and the self-esteem. I can remember mine. The first job I had, working in a pub, doing pub lunches, and the pleasure of spending my own money that I had earned. Absolutely. In terms of the threat that's posed to her by, we talk about the shadow cabinet, even talking about getting votes together, mass resignations they were talking about apparently behind the scenes, talk of getting together these votes of letters of no confidence to the 22 committee, even ahead of what is likely expected to be, even after a good speech next May, to be a trouncing in local Scottish and Welsh elections. Has that all been paid to by this speech and these announcements?
Well, with the Conservative Party, nothing is ever paid, as you know, as a thinker. I know firsthand, and others do too. But I think what she has done is said to anybody out there who thinks, that somehow the one characteristic that dominated the idea in the public's mind of who we are was the idea that we're a bunch of, backstabbers and dislike each other. And if you don't like each other, then you can hardly like the public. That, I think, probably has been put to bed for a while, certainly. And I think the main thing is that, as you saw in the hall, but I also have to tell you, amongst lots of colleagues, people are saying, for God's sake, we have to show the public that not just we have a plan, but we have a leader and we're going to stick behind it and get her to the finish line. And that is a critical element. People like loyalty. They like loyalty in families. They like loyalty in business. They like people to recognize talents in others. And that's when they look at politicians. They think, you're not really like us, are you? You spend your whole time knocking each other off. Well, I think maybe we've put an end to that.
Well, you've got personal experience of this, obviously, as a former Tory party leader in opposition in the Blair years. I can certainly remember when I was a political editor, it's like, oh, it's the summer. It's supposed to be the quiet season in Parliament. No, we've got another Tory leadership contest. We've done a lot of that lately as well. We know that Robert Jenrick makes a lot of headlines. He does the videos online. He's been making a lot of headway. He might ruffle some feathers, but a lot of us would argue that he ruffles the right feathers, and he's standing up for a lot of people who feel that they've been told to shut up and put up with stuff rather than speak their minds in recent years.
That's what I would do if I was in opposition, doing it at the same time. It's exactly what he has to do. And I thought her line there was quite good, because she kind of embraced him and said, the police aren't doing that. It's down to the shadow cabinet to get people arrested for not paying their tickets, etc., on the tube and things. And I thought that was quite a good line, because it's basically saying, you're part of a team.
So very interesting. Very interesting. Do you think this will lead to a little dip up, a little boost in the polls for the Tories?
I don't know about that, because I think the public aren't as focused on politics at the moment.
Oh no, they're not watching. They're not seeing this. You've watched the full speech. We haven't had it on air. We're just running up their headlines. Most people are going to see 2 minutes at best on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, and it's difficult as a result. Always difficult in opposition, more difficult today because of the multi-party nature of everything at the moment. But I do think that as this sort of drips through to the public psyche, that they'll see there is an alternative. The depressive and terrible behaviour of the Labour Party at the moment in government over a year, I think this is the beginning of an answer to who they should be and who they're not. And I think it answers Reform as well, because Reform is very good on telling everybody they agree with them and they hate everything. What they're not very good at right now is telling them how we get there. And that's a big problem for them. And I know that because some of them have asked me to help them, and I keep saying to them, Everything I do is published.
I wondered whether they would. Sir Index Smith, great to talk to Conservative people, former Conservative Party leader. Listening to all of that, is Sam Armstrong still in the studio? What do you make of what he had to say?
Yeah, I think Ian is actually very, very fair on where the situation is. Look, Kemi Badenoch gave a good speech today. It is not a speech, and this isn't a criticism. I think it would have been almost impossible for her to do, that is going to make the headlines for weeks and weeks and weeks to really
We're not in that territory. We're a party that's third in the polls years from an election.
That's right.
I mean, it's like, this is like kind of, what are the Greens going to do? I don't care.
I can't quite remember what Ed Davey said in his speech. Now, look, Kemi Badenoch is the leader of the opposition. She is a bit more important than that. I don't want to be unfair to her in any way. And as I say, I think she gave a very, very good speech. Ultimately, though, the job her party is expecting her to do, and it's a difficult job, is to reverse the decline the Conservatives have had over the last year, and to get themselves back into a position where, if not that they're going to be in government next time, they're going to survive. Because at the moment, the sad reality of those polls, and sad for me as someone who is a Conservative, member of the Conservative Party, is that the Conservative Party are going to go into next May and indeed further elections and could cease to be altogether.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing. But the thing I keep pointing out to people, I just remember in 2010 when we had the coalition government and all the great and the good and the political, wise souls were saying it's the end of two-party politics. 2015 Tory majority, and then and then we were told it's all changed. Then 2019 massive Tory majority. There has been a difference, but again, in 2019 everyone said the Labour Party was wiped out. That was it. It would take them a whole decade, 2 elections at best, to get back to being a viable party. They won a massive big election only 5 years later. I just think everyone needs to stop making too many predictions. Nothing is a sure thing. We have no idea what's going to happen next year, let alone by 2029 for any party. Also, come on, we knew that Labour would be bad. No one had a clue they'd be this. You're absolutely beyond useless. I mean, so beyond useless and inadequate as they already are. So, I mean, never say never. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about payouts for, millions upon millions of drivers, of up to £700 per driver after the car finance scandal. Are you in line for a payout? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:37 is the time. Don't forget, we're going to get to more of your calls. We're mixing and matching things around. I wanted to get your reaction to Kemi Badenoch's speech, so do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 to have your say. Tell us what you make of what Kemi Badenoch had to say, particularly that announcement on scrapping stamp duty. We'll come to that in just a few moments with our next guest, actually, consumer rights expert Martin James. A very good afternoon to you, Martin.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, obviously, invited you on to talk about these absolutely extraordinary millions and millions of motorists who are in line for a £700 payout. It was announced yesterday afternoon over this car finance scandal. It's amazing. 11 billion quid up for grabs. 14 million motorists in this country eligible for it. First of all, can you just quickly tell us how this came about? How have we got to a point where people are getting this payout?
Well, Julia, I've been practicing doing this because this is a long and convoluted story to get to. So I've done my level best to pricey it all down for you. For many years now, in fact, if we go back to 2021, the regulator of the industry, the Financial Conduct Authority, banned a certain type of commission that was being paid from lenders to brokers. In this instance, the people who flogged you your car finance deals. Now, it's taken so far to get to a compensation scheme for people who may have been missold because there was a court case that was rumbling on that indeed you reported on recently that went to the Supreme Court. Now, while that case was largely turned down, one aspect was upheld. And that's why we find ourselves in a position where the regulator has announced that they are considering how to operate a compensation scheme. And as you say, we're talking 8.2 billion minimum, potentially up to 11 or more in compensation that will affect 14.2 million.
I mean, these are huge sums. I mean, the financial regulator, this is the Financial Conduct Authority. I mean, there could be an appeal against this, but strangely, this number is actually lower than many of these car finance companies were fearing. So they may well just go, let's just take this and get on with it. But I mean, so who's eligible for this? 14 million people we think eligible. Who? How would you know if you were one of those 14 million?
Well, I would say to everybody watching, and I know it's a very articulate audience, Julie, but just to make the point, don't try and note all of this down. There's a lot of complexity here. The facts are, if you were sold a vehicle between the 6th of April 2007 and the 1st of November 2024, you may be one of that. The 44% of those people may be entitled to compensation, and that's because you were probably charged a certain type of commission on those agreements. Now, the reason why this has become such an issue is because it's not clear from the contracts if it was mentioned in the contracts before. Right. So don't waste your life trying to pore over old documents. Yeah. If you sold a vehicle between that period, you may be entitled to compensation. You will be contacted by the lender from January onwards. Once the agreement is in place.
They are required to contact you. What about if that lender has gone out of business? You bought a car, you can't even remember the license plate of a car, 5 cars back. How will they know how to contact you? How will they know where you are if you've moved house 10 times?
That's such a good question. Don't worry about the company that sold you the car. It is the lenders who will be contacting you, the providers of the credit agreement. Now, sadly, credit providers are not covered by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, and that means if they go bust, so do your hopes of a payout. But most of the lenders are still in place.
Yeah, because funnily enough, they make money out of charging a fortune. But basically, if you bought a car and you used some sort of, payment to the account, you didn't just pay for it, one-off, odds are you may well be eligible for this. And I looked up a few years ago when this sort of came into the news, and I just looked up, there's some free credit check, or did you have any of these deals? No, I didn't. Okay, fine, not affected by it. But a lot of people will. And 700 quid is a heck of a lot of money.
Absolutely, and that's the average. It's worthwhile pointing in mind that because of the nature of these agreements, the amount of money that might have been lent, and indeed the Supreme Court case, which involved a man who was charged 55% commission.
What?
55%, that's why they upheld it. We're talking huge amounts of money.
This is theft. This is being a con artist at this point, isn't it? And again, a lot of people, this stuff is really complicated. It is really, these documents are really complicated. You're excited about getting the car. There's a lot of costs, and you often, these costs, they're not in the contract, they're not up front. You don't realise until you've made all these huge payments over the years where you are. Well, look, that's very much good news for drivers. The question is it enough of a penalty for these companies that they won't do it again? That's the question.
Well, commission is still paid on numerous financial agreements, and indeed many other organisations and sectors do it, like the energy sector, for example. Yeah. So sadly, I feel that we may be talking about this in the not too distant.
Well, exactly, and a lot of people getting their cars on finance these days. Let me ask you about this announcement from Kemi Badenoch. Lots of different announcements in the Tory leader's keynote speech to conference, but she said that abolishing stamp duty, she said, is how we will achieve the dream of home ownership for millions. She said we can't unpick every tax, the debt, the deficit, the damage this Labour government is creating means we cannot do everything at once. But she says scrapping stamp duty will benefit people of all ages because, she says, because Conservatives must speak to all generations. The young professional buying their first flat, the couple looking for somewhere to bring up their first baby, the growing family hunting for their forever home, the pensioner who wants somewhere a little smaller or maybe to live near the grandchildren. No longer will they be punished with a tax that is a barrier to them doing the right thing for them, their family and for society. That's what Kemi Badenoch had to say. That's the politics of it. As a consumer rights expert, what do you make of that announcement?
Well, it's certainly a vote winner, and home ownership is back on the menu. For many years, it's been moved to one side as a political issue by all parties because it's very, very complicated to unravel. But the fact of the matter is it matters greatly to lots of people. Now, stamp duty is certainly a vote winner, and it's a major issue. The reduction in the threshold of stamp duty to £300,000 resulted in a mad rush up to last April for people to desperately kind of try and buy and sell homes. Yeah. And the people who didn't make it through in that time period have been very disenchanted. But it's worthwhile noting that while stamp duty is a big nudge, if you like, to get people to vote for specific parties, the whole process of getting a mortgage is a challenging one. And this is in many ways aimed at younger people, because let's not forget the biggest single blocker to getting on the housing ladder is being able to save up a suitable deposit.
Yeah, especially when you're paying sky-high rents.
Absolutely. And this is where it comes down to, in some ways, kind of the battle of the classes, because the middle classes who are able to fund those deposits are helping their kids onto the housing market. But if you are working your way up, as indeed the Conservatives do like to encourage people from those backgrounds, it is much, much harder. And that's what's going to really...
Exactly. And when Bank of Mum and Dad help out, and if I'm in a position to do it, I will absolutely be doing that. You know, what parent who was able to wouldn't? You actually weirdly kind of pushing up prices for other people. It's unfair and it creates that unfairness. But again, people are going to help their own kids, aren't they? Rather than someone they've never met down the street. That's how it works. But this is the thing about stamp duty. It's very complicated because it only starts at a rate above £125,000, but at £300,000 for your first home. But it goes up in step changes, and you kind of pay that percentage on each individual bit. But at the top of the market, and lots of people say this will be a massive, big tax cut for very rich people buying multi-million pound homes. But there is an impact for everyone else of that, because of that, I suppose, trickle-down effect, isn't it? There's people buying homes, if they're very rich, they also employ a lot of people to decorate those homes and put new bathrooms in, and they buy new furniture, and people who work for those. There's a lot of talk about how stamp duty is a real sort of dampener on the whole economy.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And this is something that really puts people off. Actually, when I speak to people who aren't on the housing ladder, and there are millions and millions of people out there, a lot of them think that they will never, ever be able to get on the ladder because of stories they hear about things like stamp duty. And yes, absolutely, trickle-down economy, there's a lot of debate about how much impact it actually has, but certainly a lot of jobs are dependent on moving home, from removal companies right the way through to painters and decorators.
Yeah, and also people literally not starting a family.
Yeah, absolutely.
The main thing we could do for our economy is have lots of people in work, having babies, and creating the next generation of workers to fund everyone in their retirement. And we're not doing that because people are going, but I can't buy a home. I don't want to settle down until I can buy a home. And part of that is this massive lump sum for many people. Again, £300,000 sounds like an awful lot. If you're a 20-year-old right now, you ain't getting much for £300,000 in large parts of the country. Certainly not a family home.
Well, exactly. And, I don't want to depress anyone. I'm just into 50 years old, and I'm just buying my first property now.
No. This is so wrong. I mean, again, this used to be the norm. People in their 20s could buy a home. You know, if you had two people both working, you could buy a home. And now we're talking about people in their 40s doing it. Well, I wish you the very best. And Marcia James, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Coming back to you, Sam Armstrong, in the studio, you were just crunching some of the numbers on stamp duty in terms of how much it brings in. I was under the illusion, again, completely wrong, thank you for correcting me, that it didn't actually bring in that much money. Last year, £11.6 billion was brought in to Treasury coffers. But how much is it predicted to bring in by 2029, the time likely of the next election? Between
25 and 30 billion, 26 billion there or thereabouts. And
it's a huge sum of money.
£1 billion here, £1 billion there. All of a sudden you're starting to talk about real money.
So is Kemi Bade not counting on the fact, real money, that's not money down the back of the sofa. Would she be counting on the idea that, well, you know, you don't get that money directly into Treasury coffers, but all of the economic driving forces that puts into place...
Two things, big things. Firstly, she's outlined plans for 46 billion quid's worth of cuts, largely, if we're honest, from welfare.
Good. I mean, again, that's majority support in this country.
But secondly, on the issue of savings, the reason that stamp duty is a particularly bad tax is that it's a tax on a transaction, and when you tax transactions, you make people less likely to spend them because people just think, why bother? But unlike VAT, it's not like a little bit on everything. Yeah. It's that one big lump sum that's a bit of a kick in the teeth.
And at a time when you are already stretched. You've got estate agent fees, lawyers' fees, and the cost of your new big home and your
mortgage doesn't cover the stamp duty, by the way, right? No. The mortgage covers the value of the house. Yep. This is out-of-pocket expenses at a time.
I've always thought if you have going to have stamp duty, it should be on the sale of your property, not the purchase of it, if you were going to have that tax at all.
Well, it would make an awful lot more sense to do it. As it is, the Conservative Party is saying they're going to abolish it. It's worth saying only for your first home. So if you own multiple homes, you'll still pay the tax.
Oh, is that the detail? I haven't got that. But again, this is going to make a massive difference. 12:48 time. Going to take a quick break, and up next, going to take your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
attacks, religious retaliations, revenge attacks for the Islamist terrorist assault on the synagogue last Thursday. Well, at least in one case, we have reason to believe that that assumption, jumping to that conclusion, was wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:52 is the time. Well, we didn't get a chance to get some of your calls earlier in the show. We just wanted to talk about these developments in these Gaza peace talks. But wow, all the attention is going on the announcement from Kemi Badenoch, the Tory party leader, at a party conference of abolishing stamp duty. We were just talking with my guest Sam Armstrong just a couple of moments ago about what this would mean in terms of money not going to coffers. At least 25 billion by 2029. We're looking at the time of the next election. 11.6 billion raised by stamp duty right now. We're not talking about abolishing it for first-time buyers or anything. But it's only for your main home, your first home, your only home. If you rent somewhere, so you buy somewhere to rent out, it won't apply there, which I think is certainly quite right. Talk about your home that you live in. If you buy a property, if the Tories are in power after 29, you would not have to pay stamp duty on it. There's a lot of ifs there, though, a lot of provisos. Does any policy announcement that Kemi Badenoch made matter right now, 4 years out from an election? Is she basically trying to come up with something just vaguely different from reform as they transfer Tories in the polls? Well, let's talk about this with you. 0344 499 1000. Great to get more of your calls on. Alan is in Salford. And Alan, you want to talk about that announcement. What do you make of it?
Well, it's the first day I'm not on here busted the blood vessel, and I.
It makes a change. nice to know what happy Alan sounds like.
Yeah. Well, I've just watched Kemi Badenoch's speech, and actually, I've actually seen this girl a few times. I'm trying to say girl, I don't mean no respect.
I know you don't. Yeah, don't worry.
This lady. And the speech was one of the best speeches I'd ever seen from a man or woman in many, many years.
Very interesting. What did you like about it?
Well, she's the honesty of her. To be honest, and she can speak, not like Rachel from accounts and the rest of them.
Don't. It's just
even Keir Starmer.
They're so painful, aren't they, when they're speaking?
Oh,
so you like the cut of her jib, and you liked what she had to say. There was a lot of policy announcements.
And I like the policies. I think it's given them a leg up. I'm still not. Whether it's too late for him, I'm not sure. I think I'll still vote for reform, but if there's enough people, I don't want to split the reform vote with a Tory vote and end up back with them lot again. That's what I do.
Well, and this is the conversation that's been going on this week about, people being told, would you defect? And, every Tory we have on, are you on the defection watch list and the like? But again, there'll be a lot of people, we know from these polls out, the More in Common poll, something like, 4 out of 10 Tory voters in 2019 for Boris, get Brexit done election, say they're now voting reform. But would they come back to the Tory fold if they thought they were a more viable party?
Yeah, but the policies, scrapping net zero, this and that and the other, and for the apprenticeships instead of all these
Mickey Mouse university degrees, yeah,
all these media study degrees, and the rest of all this nonsense that no one gets any jobs from.
Yeah,
but. Oh, I did notice Mr. Jenrick, as he was leaving the stage, was being interviewed by the GB News guy.
Who? I don't know who you're talking about, but anyway, yeah.
Robert Jenrick. Is it Robert Jenrick?
No, I was talking about the TV station, but anyway, carry on.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there was a guy, political editor of GB News, that tried to pull Jenrick on his way out off the stage after the speech. And I thought it was so disingenuous. He said to him, what do you think of the speech? He said, it was good. Actually, it was brilliant. Actually,
you think it was better than good? Very interesting. Can we stop name checking rivals, please? That's I'm very good friends with all those people, but there we are. Anyway, hello to them all. Let's go to Alan. Thank you very much. Lovely to hear a happy Alan. He thought it was a great speech. He's like, he's wavering a bit on his move to reform. Michael is in Lancashire. Michael, hello. What do you want to say?
Morning, Julia. How are you?
Late night for Michael last night.
I listened to the whole speech. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And everything she had to say, I was really impressed by it.
Well, are you are you a long-time Tory supporter? Have you flirted with reform? Where are you?
I voted Tories until the last election. I voted for Reform.
That's interesting.
And I was, like I say, I was really impressed with everything she said. It's sort of everything I stand for is what she was talking about. But
what in particular? What was it in particular that spoke to you?
Just the control of the borders, the sort of net zero aspect of it. Yeah. Again, it's not getting rid of the idea of climate change, but it's doing it in a controllable manner and doing it in a way that's not going to affect the country like it is doing at the moment.
Dropping net zero policies that will impoverish us and do nothing for the planet. And you like the cut of her jib, same as Alan. You think, good speech, sensible policies. What did you make in particular of stamp duty and that announcement that she would abolish it if she got elected?
I think it's a great thing because, I mean, I've got young children. I've got an 18-year-old who's obviously going to be looking to move into that way of life soon, in the next sort of 5 years maybe. And it'll be great for her and for the others. But overall, at the moment, I don't think it's enough for me to move across and vote for them again.
So it's a start. You're paying attention, but maybe not enough. Really interesting, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, interesting. You've been with us the whole show. I think a lot of people, big speech, Kemi Badenoch. We need some announcements. People are liking the sound of what she's saying. They're liking the way she delivered the speech. I think this has stopped any leadership challenge in the immediate future. But interesting to have two Tory voters who now think they're Reform voters, but going, but you know what? I'm paying attention now.
Yeah, and there'll be many people turning around and saying, well, why didn't Kemi Badenoch do this a year ago when she first came in? You were told, you said your whole thing was don't do policy, we're going to wait till 2027. You tried that, it didn't quite work. Now you're trying policy, people like it. It's a bit of an interesting point, really.
Very interesting. Well, Ian Collins is here. He's going to take us through the next few hours now. Yes. I mean, interesting speech, seems to have gone down very well. A lot of his policy announcements, stamp duty and all of that.
Do you know what? It's just missing that extra, that little firework you need.
But it's part of that doesn't matter what someone in opposition